They
Look
say the
at you,
loudest man in the
absolutely
room is
useless.
usually the
You think you
weakest.
belong in a place
But
like
on a
this,
rainy
serving people
Tuesday
like us?
evening in
Go on, get out
Manhattan,
of my
the
sight.
loudest man in the city was a billionaire named Marcus Caldwell. He sat at table 9 in the most exclusive French restaurant in New York, convinced that his money made him untouchable. He looked at the young woman pouring his water, a tired server in a stained apron, and he laughed. He told his dinner companion, loud enough for the entire dining room to hear, not to bother asking the girl for recommendations. She probably could not even read the menu. He was wrong. 5 minutes later, that invisible waitress did not just read the menu. She dismantled his arrogance in flawless French, exposed his ignorance before Manhattan's elite, and set in motion a reckoning that would destroy his empire without spilling a single drop of wine. This is the story of Sophie Bennett, and why you should never mistake silence for weakness. The story begins not in that restaurant, but in a hospital room on the Upper East Side. Mount Sinai Medical Center, 8th floor, where the antiseptic smell of industrial cleaning solution mixed with the faint sweetness of dying flowers. Eleanor Bennett sat propped against white pillows, her hands trembling slightly from the multiple sclerosis that had been slowly stealing her body for the past 6 years. She was 58 years old. Once, she had been a beauty. Dark hair that fell in waves, eyes the color of strong coffee, a smile that could disarm anyone. Now the disease had carved away at her, leaving behind a woman who looked a decade older, her body betraying her while her mind stayed sharp as broken glass. Her daughter sat beside the bed, reading aloud from a worn paperback of French poetry. Baudelaire, their ritual. Every Tuesday evening, Sophie came straight from her dinner shift to read to her mother in the language they had both learned in another life, when they lived in Lyon and the world made sense. Eleanor listened with her eyes closed, but she was not relaxed. She knew her daughter too well. "You are hiding something," she said, interrupting a line about flowers and evil. "Your voice has that quality, that tightness your father used to get before he did something dangerous." Sophie looked up from the page. She was 24 years old, but exhaustion had aged her. Blonde hair pulled back so severely it gave her headaches. Circles under her eyes the color of old bruises. Hands that smelled like dish soap and French fry grease no matter how many times she washed them. "Just tired, Mom. 3 jobs." Eleanor opened her eyes. Even diminished by disease, her gaze could cut through deception like a scalpel through skin. "Do not inherit your father's martyrdom," she said. "He thought he could save the world by sacrificing himself. Look where that got him. Look where it got us." The words hung in the air between them. David Bennett, husband, father. The man who had supposedly jumped from the Golden Gate Bridge 3 years ago after bad investments destroyed their lives. The official story. The lie that both women had learned to recite without choking on it. Sophie closed the book. She wanted to tell her mother everything, about the medical bills stacked on her kitchen table like a house of cards, about the bank account that showed $178 and the rent due in 6 days, about the impossible choice between her mother's medication and food. But Eleanor was already carrying enough weight. The disease, the grief, the slow dissolution of everything she had built. "I will be fine," Sophie said. She kissed her mother's forehead, dry and hot like paper left too long in the sun. "I will see you Thursday." "Be careful," Eleanor said. She caught her daughter's hand with trembling fingers. "Whatever you are planning, whatever burden you are carrying, remember that pride is expensive. Your father paid for his with everything." Sophie held her mother's hand for 3 heartbeats. Then she gathered her coat and left before the tears could start. She had a shift at the restaurant in 90 minutes, no time for crying. The apartment in Jackson Heights was a 400-square-foot box on the 3rd floor of a building that smelled like old cooking oil and mildew. Sophie climbed the stairs, her legs aching from the morning shift at the diner in the Bronx. 6 to 11, serving coffee and eggs to construction workers and cab drivers, who left dollar tips on $8 checks. Then a few hours of fitful sleep before the evening shift at L'Étoile d'Argent, where she became invisible among the chandeliers and silk carpets. Inside, the apartment was neat but suffocating. Medical bills organized in manila folders, a small altar on the bookshelf with her father's photograph, a rosary Eleanor had given her, a pressed flower from their garden in Lyon. Sophie stood in front of the bathroom mirror and practiced her smile, the one she wore at the restaurant, empty, pleasant, erased. At 24, she should have been finishing her degree at Columbia. Comparative literature. She had been a sophomore when the world collapsed, when the creditors came, when her father died, when she and her mother fled to New York with 2 suitcases and a lifetime of questions no one would answer. The mirror showed her the truth she tried to hide. She looked defeated, worn down, the kind of tired that sleep could not fix. Her phone buzzed. A text from the restaurant manager. Table 9 tonight. VIP. Marcus Caldwell. Do not mess this up. Sophie stared at the name. Everyone in New York knew Marcus Caldwell, CEO of Caldwell Logistics, shipping magnate, billionaire, the man who had once sued a dry cleaner for $3 million over a lost button. The kind of man who treated service workers like furniture. She put on her uniform, black pants, white button-down shirt, black apron that had a stain near the pocket she could never quite remove. She looked at herself one more time. The invisible woman. The one people looked through instead of at. Then she grabbed her coat and headed into the rain. The subway ride from Queens to Manhattan took 45 minutes. Sophie stood pressed against other tired bodies, all of them riding the evening rush in silence. She thought about her mother's words. Pride is expensive. Your father paid for his with everything. But was it pride that had killed him or truth? The question she could never answer. The question that woke her at 3 a.m, gasping. L'Étoile d'Argent occupied a limestone building on the Upper East Side, wedged between a private club and an art gallery that sold paintings for more money than Sophie would earn in 5 years. The name meant the Silver Star. The interior was designed to intimidate. Baccarat crystal chandeliers that weighed more than a car. Carpets hand-woven in Lyon from silk that cost $800 per square foot. Tables set with gold cutlery and china so thin you could see light through it. Sophie entered through the service entrance, a narrow door hidden in an alley that smelled of garbage and exhaust. The kitchen was chaos, steam and shouting and the clash of pots. She changed into her service shoes, worn at the heels, and tied her apron. Henri Dubois found her immediately. The maitre d' was a small, nervous man who smelled like cigarette smoke and anxiety. He had worked at L'Étoile d'Argent for 20 years and wore his authority like a weapon. Table 9, he said, gripping her elbow hard enough to leave marks. Marcus Caldwell. He is dining with Victoria Rousseau. She is French. Old money. A board member for some European shipping company. This is the most important table in New York tonight. And if you drop anything, if you stutter, if you breathe wrong, you are fired. Do you understand? Sophie understood. She understood that her entire life hung on the whims of people who would not remember her name 5 minutes after she left. She understood that the $847 for her mother's medication depended on tips from men who thought she was too stupid to read. I understand, she said. Good. He released her arm. The reservation is for 8 o'clock. We are at half capacity tonight because of the rain. That means every table matters. Every tip matters. Do not embarrass me. Do not embarrass this restaurant. Sophie walked into the dining room. Even half empty, the space hummed with wealth, low conversations, the clink of crystal, the rustle of expensive fabric. She took her position by the service station and waited. At exactly 8 o'clock, Marcus Caldwell arrived. He was a big man. Not tall, but big, taking up space the way powerful men do, as if the world should rearrange itself around them. Navy suit tailored so precisely, it might as well have been painted on. Shoes polished to a mirror shine, salt and pepper hair styled with product that probably cost more than Sophie's rent. He walked with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. Behind him came Victoria Rousseau, 52 years old, elegant in the way only European women of a certain class could be, vintage Chanel suit in cream, dark hair swept into a chignon, pearl earrings that caught the light. Her eyes were sharp and assessing, taking in everything with the focus of someone used to reading rooms. Henri seated them at table 9 with enough bowing and scraping to make Sophie's stomach turn. Marcus settled into his chair like a king claiming a throne. He did not look at Henri, did not acknowledge the effort, just picked up the menu and frowned. Sophie approached with a water pitcher, her heart pounding hard enough to make her hands shake. She kept them steady through sheer will. Good evening, she said, her voice carefully neutral. Sparkling or still? Marcus waved a hand without looking up. Still, keep it coming, it is humid in here. She poured his water with the precision of someone who had done it 1,000 times. Not a drop on the white tablecloth. Then she moved to Victoria's side. "Sparkling, please," she said. Her voice was accented, but her English was perfect. She looked at Sophie for just a moment. Really looked, like Sophie was a person instead of a function. "Thank you." Marcus was still frowning at the menu. Sophie recognized the expression. The menu at L'Étoile d'Argent was written entirely in French. High dialect French. The kind taught at expensive schools in Paris. No English translations. Chef Jean-Luc's little pretension. His way of keeping out the unworthy. Sophie could read every word. She had learned French as a child in Lyon, before the fall. Before poverty stripped away everything except memory. "So as I was saying," Marcus announced, his voice cutting through the quiet of the dining room, "the European market is soft. They do not have the grit we have here in America. I need someone in Paris who understands that business is war, not a wine tasting." Victoria took a sip of her sparkling water. Her expression remained neutral, but Sophie saw something flicker in her eyes. Amusement, perhaps, or contempt. "Paris is a delicate ecosystem, Marcus. It requires finesse, cultural sensitivity. You cannot simply bulldoze through French regulations the way you do in New York." "Regulations are for people without lawyers," Marcus said. He was scanning the menu now, squinting slightly, looking for something recognizable. A steak. Something American. But the entries were things like roble de lièvre au genièvre and ballotine de volaille farcie. He had no idea what any of it meant. Sophie stood silently, waiting. The protocol was clear. Never speak unless asked. Never interrupt. Be invisible until summoned. She watched Marcus struggle, watched his jaw tighten, watched him realize he was out of his depth in front of a woman he was trying to impress. He needed a way out, a distraction, a target. He found one. "You," he said, snapping his fingers in Sophie's direction like summoning a dog. She kept her face blank. "Yes, sir?" "What is the house specialty?" He butchered the French word, turning spécialité into spec et tea. "The chef recommends the coq au vin this evening," Sophie began. "It is prepared with wine from Burgundy and served with—" Marcus cut her off with a loud, cruel laugh. He turned to Victoria, a smirk spreading across his face. God, listen to that accent. It is like hearing a cat get strangled. Sophie's face burned. She felt the blood rush to her cheeks, felt her grip on the water pitcher tighten until her knuckles went white. Every person in the dining room could hear him. The couple at table 8 stopped eating. A businessman near the window put down his wine glass. Victoria did not laugh. She looked at Marcus with cool, detached eyes. "She is merely doing her job," Victoria said quietly. "Is she?" Marcus leaned back, crossing his arms. He looked Sophie up and down with the kind of assessment you would give livestock. "Look at her, Victoria, those shoes, that apron. She is probably from some nowhere town in Jersey. She does not understand half these words. She just memorized the sounds like a parrot." Sophie stared at a spot on the tablecloth, a tiny imperfection in the weave. She focused on it with every ounce of willpower she possessed. Do not react. Think of Mom. Think of the medication. Think of the bills. "Hey!" Marcus snapped his fingers directly in front of her face. "I am talking to you. Can you even read this menu? Or do you just look at pictures?" The words hit like a slap. "I can read the menu, sir," Sophie whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Marcus slammed his hand on the table. The silverware jumped. The crystal rang like a small bell. "Do not lie to me. I hate liars. You are a waitress. If you were smart enough to understand French cuisine, you would not be cleaning up after people like me, would you?" He turned to Victoria, shaking his head theatrically. "This is the problem with America today, Victoria. Unskilled labor thinking they deserve respect. She cannot even read the menu, and she expects a tip." He looked back at Sophie with a cruel glint in his eye. "Go on, then. Prove me wrong. Explain the third item on the entree list in English if you can." He pointed a thick finger at the line that read velouté de châtaigne à la crème fouettée. Sophie looked at the words. She did not just see letters. She saw memories. She saw her childhood in Lyon before the bankruptcy, before her father's suicide, before the debt collectors took everything. She saw the long afternoons studying literature at the Sorbonne, before she had to drop out and flee to New York to hide from her father's enemies. She saw the garden with the chestnut tree where she used to hide and read. She looked at Marcus Caldwell, a man who possessed everything she had lost, yet understood the value of nothing. Something inside Sophie snapped. It was not a violent snap, but a quiet, resolute click. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. She lifted her chin. The silence in L'Étoile d'Argent was absolute. Even the clinking of forks had ceased. All eyes were on the billionaire and the waitress. Henri took a step forward, ready to intervene and fire Sophie on the spot to save the situation. But he was too slow. Sophie shifted her weight. Her posture changed. The slump of the exhausted worker vanished, replaced by a spine of steel. When she looked at Marcus, her eyes were no longer submissive. They were piercing. "The item you are pointing to, Monsieur Caldwell," Sophie began, her voice gaining a volume and resonance that surprised even her. But she did not stop there. She did not just translate. She switched languages. She spoke in French, not the broken French of a high school student, not the functional French of a tourist, the French of a native Parisian aristocrat. The R's were rolled with guttural perfection, the vowels round and precise. She moved through the language like water, effortless and exact. She did not just translate the menu item. She explained it, the history of the dish, the region where chestnuts were harvested, the specific technique for creating the velouté, the cultural significance of elevating peasant food to haute cuisine. She spoke for 30 seconds in flawless, aristocratic French, every word a small blade. Marcus's mouth fell open. He did not understand a single word, but he understood the tone, the superiority, the absolute command. This was not a waitress begging for scraps. This was someone addressing him from a position of authority. Sophie switched back to English, her accent shifting to a refined transatlantic precision that would have made finishing school teachers weep with pride. "In English, sir, it is a chestnut velouté, a soup made from chestnuts harvested in the Ardèche region of France after the first autumn rain, when the nuts are at peak sweetness. It is served with cream that has been infused with smoked bacon to cut the richness. A peasant dish elevated to art, a transformation that requires—" She paused, looked directly into his eyes. "A certain level of sophistication to fully appreciate." The silence in L'Étoile d'Argent was absolute. No one breathed, no one moved. Even the kitchen had gone quiet, the cooks emerging to see what had happened. Victoria Rousseau was smiling, slowly, dangerously. She turned to Sophie and spoke in French. Quick, casual French. Testing. "You know the region?" Sophie answered in the same dialect. The specific dialect of the Ardèche, rural, precise. "Yes, madame. I spent summers there as a child. My father taught at the university in Lyon. The chestnuts must be harvested after rain, or they are too dry for proper texture." Victoria's eyebrows rose. The dialect Sophie had used was rare, educated, the kind you only learned by living there. Marcus realized he had lost control. His face turned deep crimson. He slammed his hand on the table again, harder this time. "Enough! Stop speaking that gibberish! I asked for a translation, not a lecture." He turned his rage fully on Sophie. Spittle flew from his lips. "You think you are clever? You think memorizing some phrases makes you my equal? I could buy this restaurant and turn it into a parking lot by tomorrow morning. I could—" Sophie cut him off. Her voice was quiet, but it carried across the room like a bell. "Money can buy the restaurant, Monsieur Caldwell, but it cannot buy taste, and it certainly cannot buy class." The gasps were audible. A woman at table 4 actually put her hand over her mouth. Another diner reached for his phone, probably already typing a text about what he was witnessing. Henri looked like he was dying. He took a step forward, one hand raised, ready to apologize, to fire Sophie, to do whatever it took to save the situation. But Marcus was faster. He stood so violently, his chair scraped across the floor with a shriek. He towered over Sophie, his face purple with rage. "You are fired! Get out, now!" Henri rushed over, nearly tripping. "Monsieur Caldwell, I am so sorry. She's leaving immediately. I will have her removed." "I want her banned!" Marcus shouted. "And I want this meal comped. This is an insult, an absolute insult to my dignity." Sophie untied her apron. She did not wait for Henri to dismiss her. Her hands did not shake. She folded the stained white cloth neatly, precisely, and placed it on the table beside Marcus's untouched water glass. "There is no need to fire me, Monsieur Dubois," she said. Her voice was calm, almost serene. "I resign." She looked at Marcus Caldwell one final time, held his gaze until he looked away first. "Enjoy your velouté," she said. Try not to choke on the irony. Then Sophie Bennett turned and walked away. Her legs trembled, but she kept her spine straight. She could hear Marcus screaming behind her, demanding the owner, threatening lawsuits. She pushed through the kitchen doors, and the sound cut off like someone had thrown a switch. The kitchen staff stared at her. They had heard everything. Chef Jean-Luc, a severe man who rarely spoke, gave her the smallest nod. Respect from an unexpected corner. Sophie grabbed her purse from her locker. Her hands were shaking now, adrenaline flooding through her system. She had done it. She had stood up for herself. She had spoken the truth to power. And she had just destroyed her life. The medication was $847. Rent was $1,400. She had $178 in the bank and no job. Her mother was dying by degrees in a hospital bed. And Sophie had just thrown away her primary income because she could not swallow one more insult. She walked out the back entrance into the alley. The rain hit her immediately, cold and hard. It soaked through her thin uniform in seconds. She leaned against the brick wall, the rough surface catching on her shirt, and slid down until she hit the wet pavement. The tears came then, hot against her cold skin, mixing with the rain. She buried her face in her hands and let herself break just for a moment, just here in the dark where no one could see. Stupid, she whispered to herself. Stupid, stupid pride. Her mother had been right. Pride was expensive. David Bennett had paid with his life, and now Sophie had paid with her mother's medication, with their apartment, with their future. She sat there for 5 minutes, maybe 10, the rain turning the alley into a small river. She was soaked to the bone, shivering, wondering if she could beg for her job back at the Bronx diner, wondering if they would take her, wondering how to tell her mother that she had failed. Then she heard it, the smooth purr of an expensive engine, tires splashing through water. A black limousine pulled up to the mouth of the alley, the kind that cost more per hour to rent than Sophie made in a week. She did not look up, probably Marcus leaving, probably wanting one more chance to humiliate her. She curled into herself, trying to become invisible one last time. But the car did not drive past. It stopped. The engine idled. Rain drummed on the roof. Then the rear door opened. An umbrella appeared, large and black, held by a feminine hand. Mademoiselle Bennett. The voice was accented, commanding, not unkind. Sophie looked up through wet hair and smeared mascara. Victoria Rousseau stood there, holding the umbrella, looking down at her with those sharp, assessing eyes. "Get in the car," Victoria said. It was not a request. "I cannot," Sophie stammered, trying to stand. Her legs did not want to cooperate. "I am soaking wet. I will ruin the leather." Victoria's smile was small and dangerous. "It is a rental. Besides, I believe we have much to discuss, starting with why the daughter of David Bennett, the greatest linguistic cryptographer in Europe, is serving soup to idiots like Marcus Caldwell." The world stopped. The rain seemed to pause mid-fall. The sound of the city faded to nothing. Sophie stared at the woman above her, at the extended hand, at the open car door and the warm light inside. "How do you know my father's name?" Her voice came out as a whisper. Victoria's expression softened, just barely. "Get in, Sophie. The game has changed. And I think you are ready to stop being invisible and start being seen." Sophie looked at the hand, at the car, at the choice standing in front of her. She could walk away, go home, figure out how to survive another day as the woman no one noticed. Or she could take the hand, step into the unknown, find out how this stranger knew her father, find out what else had been hidden from her. She thought of Eleanor in the hospital bed, of David and the secrets he had carried, of Marcus Caldwell's face when she spoke in perfect French, of the moment she had stopped being furniture and become human. Sophie took Victoria's hand. The older woman's grip was strong. She pulled Sophie to her feet with surprising force. The interior of the limousine smelled like lavender and leather. Warm air from the heater washed over Sophie's frozen skin. Victoria pressed a button, and a privacy screen slid up, sealing them away from the driver. Then she pulled a cashmere blanket from a compartment and handed it to Sophie. "Dry yourself," Victoria said, settling into the seat across from her. "You look like you have been through a war." Sophie wrapped the blanket around her shoulders. The warmth was almost painful after the cold. "Who are you?" she asked. Victoria poured 2 glasses of water from a crystal decanter. She handed one to Sophie. "I am Victoria Rousseau. I sit on the board of Mer Elegance, a French shipping company. I knew your father 20 years ago, when I was young and stupid and about to marry the wrong man. David showed me the evidence that my fiancé was laundering money for arms dealers. He saved my life. We stayed friends. Sophie's hands trembled around the glass. When David died, Victoria's voice softened. When he died, he made me promise something. If anything ever happened to him, I would find you, make sure you were safe, but you disappeared, you and your mother. It took me 3 years to track you down. And when I did, she gestured at Sophie's soaked uniform. I found you invisible. The word hung between them. My father killed himself, Sophie said. The official story. Bad investments. Victoria shook her head slowly. Your father was murdered, Sophie, by the same people he was investigating when he saved me. The Russo Syndicate. They traffic humans across the Atlantic. Women, girls. Your father discovered their operation and tried to stop them. They made it look like suicide. The glass slipped from Sophie's fingers. It hit the carpeted floor but did not break. Water spread in a dark stain. No, Sophie whispered. That is not… We were told… You were told lies, Victoria said. She reached across and took both of Sophie's hands in hers. Sophie, I am so sorry. I should have found you sooner, should have protected you, but I needed time, evidence, resources. Why are you telling me this now? Because Marcus Caldwell works with the Russo Syndicate. His ships transport more than grain and electronics, and right now, he is trying to buy Mare Elegance to expand his operations into Europe. I have been blocking him for months. That is why we were dining together. He thinks he can convince me. The car was moving now, gliding through the rain-slicked streets of Manhattan. Sophie watched the lights blur past the window. What do you want from me? Victoria's grip on her hands tightened. I want justice. For your father. For my sister who died in one of Caldwell's containers 9 years ago. For every woman whose name appears in ledgers that no one will ever see. But I cannot do it alone, Sophie. I am too visible, too connected. If I move against him directly, he will know, and I am invisible. Victoria smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who had been hunting for a very long time and had finally found the right weapon. Yes, you are invisible, and you have your father's gift. I saw it tonight. You destroyed a billionaire with a single sentence in his own restaurant. Imagine what you could do with training, with resources, with purpose. The car stopped. Sophie looked out the window. They were in front of a glass tower in Midtown, Victoria's building. I am offering you a choice, Victoria said. You can go home, try to find another job. Watch your mother die slowly because you cannot afford her medication. Stay invisible for the rest of your life. Or, Victoria opened the car door, rain and city noise rushed in. Or you come upstairs. We talk about your father, about Marcus Caldwell, about what it means to finish what David started. You stop serving soup and start serving justice. Sophie looked at the open door, at the rain, at Victoria's extended hand for the second time that night. She thought of Eleanor asking her not to inherit David's martyrdom. She thought of Marcus Caldwell's laugh. She thought of the word invisible and how she had worn it like a second skin for 3 years. She thought of her father teaching her French through word games, never explaining why it mattered, never telling her he was preparing her for something. Sophie Bennett climbed out of the car. The rain hit her again, but she did not flinch. She stood up straight, the way she had in the restaurant, the way someone taught her in another life. I want to know everything, she said. Victoria's smile widened. Then let us go inside. We have a great deal to discuss. And Sophie? Yes? Welcome back to the world of the visible. They walked into the building together. The doorman held the entrance without question. The elevator was made of glass and chrome. As it rose, Sophie could see the city spreading out below her. Manhattan in the rain, millions of lights, millions of people, most of them invisible to those who did not want to see. But Sophie Bennett was done being invisible. Whatever came next, whatever Victoria was offering, it had to be better than drowning in the rain while the world walked past. The elevator doors opened onto a penthouse. Sophie stepped inside. The door closed behind her with a soft click. And somewhere across the city, in a French restaurant that catered to billionaires, Marcus Caldwell sat at table 9 and demanded to speak to the owner about the waitress who had ruined his evening. He had no idea that he had just humiliated the daughter of the one man the Russo Syndicate had feared. He had no idea that his empire was already beginning to crack. He had no idea that the invisible woman he had dismissed would become the weapon that destroyed him. But he would learn. They all would. The penthouse smelled of lavender and old money. Not the aggressive scent of new wealth trying to announce itself, but the subtle fragrance of someone who had never needed to prove anything. Victoria Rousseau moved through the space like she owned it, because she did. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park, the rain creating rivers of light down the glass. The furniture was minimal, expensive, a single painting on the wall that Sophie recognized from an art history class she had taken in another life. Monet, an original. Victoria pressed a button, and a privacy screen descended over the windows, turning the view into opacity. She gestured to a leather chair. "Sit. You are shivering." Sophie sat. The cashmere blanket was still wrapped around her shoulders, but she could not stop shaking. Shock, probably. Or the realization that her entire understanding of the past 3 years had just shattered in a limousine. Victoria poured 2 glasses of wine from a decanter. She handed one to Sophie. "Drink. You will need it for what I'm about to tell you." Sophie took the glass. Her hands trembled enough to make the wine shimmer. She set it down without drinking. "Tell me about my father." Victoria settled into the chair across from her. For a moment she looked older, tired, like she had been carrying something heavy for too long. "I met David Bennett in 1999. I was 25 years old, the daughter of a French diplomat, engaged to a man my parents chose, Edouard Marchand, old family, good connections, everything looked perfect on paper." She took a sip of wine. "David was consulting for my father on some financial matter I did not understand. Cryptography, pattern recognition in corporate ledgers. He was brilliant, quiet, the kind of man who saw what others missed. One day he asked to speak with me privately. He showed me documents, proof that my fiancé was laundering money for arms dealers, weapons going to conflict zones in Africa, blood money hidden in shell companies." Sophie leaned forward. This was not the David Bennett she knew. Her father had been a linguistics professor, gentle, always reading poetry, always teaching her word games. "He saved me from becoming complicit," Victoria continued, "helped me break the engagement without destroying my family's reputation. We stayed friends for 20 years. He would call me sometimes, ask about markets in Europe, about shipping regulations. I thought it was academic interest." Her voice hardened. "It was not academic. David worked for people who needed things hidden or found. He was a forensic accountant who specialized in seeing patterns in chaos. Criminal organizations used him, politicians used him, corporations used him. He took their money and he kept their secrets because he had a family to protect. You, your mother, the life in Lyon." Sophie felt the room tilt. She gripped the arms of the chair. "That is not possible. He taught literature at the Sorbonne. He taught 1 class per semester, as cover. His real work happened in the spaces between, decoding offshore accounts, tracking shell companies, finding money that powerful people wanted to disappear." "Then why did he kill himself?" Victoria set down her wine glass. The sound it made against the marble table was sharp, final. "He did not. Sophie, your father was murdered, made to look like suicide, because he discovered something he could not ignore." The room was very quiet. Outside, the rain continued to fall. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. "Tell me," Sophie said. Her voice was steady, calmer than she felt. Victoria stood and walked to a wall panel. She pressed it, and a section slid back, revealing a safe. She spun the combination, opened it, and pulled out a manila envelope. She handed it to Sophie. "In 2015, my younger sister Margot disappeared. She was 19, studying at the Sorbonne. Beautiful. Brilliant. One day she was there, the next, gone. No note, no trace. The police found nothing." Victoria's hands clenched into fists. 6 months later, they found her body in a shipping container in New Jersey. She had been trafficked, sold, used, discarded. The investigation went nowhere. The container had passed through too many hands. No one was responsible. Everyone was. Sophie opened the envelope. Inside were photographs. A young woman with Victoria's eyes, smiling in some photos. A body in others. Sophie closed it quickly. "I am sorry," she said. The words felt inadequate. David helped me investigate, Victoria said, quietly, using his skills. He tracked the shipping manifests, the payments, the hidden accounts. It took him years, but he found the network. The Russo syndicate, they move cargo across the Atlantic, legitimate goods to hide the illegitimate, women, girls, drugs, weapons, billions of dollars in a machine that destroys lives. And my father found them. More than found them. He froze their accounts, used a cipher key only he knew, locked away $40 million of their money, and threatened to give the evidence to Interpol unless they stopped, unless they released the women they held, unless they faced justice. Victoria sat back down. Her face was hard. The Russos do not respond well to threats. They drained David's legitimate accounts, destroyed his reputation with false investment scandals, made him look like a fool who gambled away his family's future. Then they made him look like a coward who jumped off a bridge rather than face his debts. Sophie could not breathe. The room felt airless. Your mother knows, Victoria said quietly. She suspected. She could never prove it, but she knows David did not abandon you. He tried to save you by destroying them. Why are you telling me this now? Because Marcus Caldwell is the Russo Syndicate's primary shipper for North American operations. His logistics company provides the infrastructure, the containers, the false manifests, the legitimate cover for illegitimate cargo. Right now, he is trying to buy Mare Elegance, the French shipping line where I sit on the board. If he succeeds, he expands their operation into Europe, more routes, more volume, more women who end up like Margot. Victoria leaned forward. Her eyes were intense. I have been blocking him for months, stalling, creating regulatory obstacles. But I cannot stop him forever. He has lawyers, money, political connections. What I need is evidence, proof of his real operations, something that will destroy him before he can expand. And you want me to help you find it. Victoria nodded slowly. Marcus keeps a private ledger, a black book where he records the real transactions. He does not trust digital records. Too easy to hack, too easy to trace. He writes everything down in code, the kind of code your father taught you to read when you thought it was just games. Sophie sat very still. She was thinking about the word games, the cipher puzzles David would create, the way he taught her to see patterns in random letters. She had thought it was educational, fun, a father bonding with his daughter. It had been training. What do you want from me? Sophie asked. Victoria stood and walked to the window. Even with the privacy screen down, she looked out as if she could see the city beyond. I want you to finish what David started. I want you to infiltrate Marcus Caldwell's organization, gain his trust, find that ledger, decode it, give me evidence that will bury him and the Russo syndicate so deep they never see daylight again. Sophie laughed. It came out bitter. I am a waitress. I have $178 in my bank account. I just got fired. How exactly do you expect me to infiltrate a billionaire's company? Victoria turned around. Her smile was sharp. You become someone else, someone educated, sophisticated, someone Marcus would want to hire. We have 3 months to transform you. I have resources, money, connections, people who owe me favors. What I need from you is your father's gift for patterns and your own gift for languages. She walked back to Sophie and extended her hand. I will pay off every cent of your mother's medical debt. Tonight, I will move her to the best MS clinic in New York. I will give you a salary that will make you forget what poverty feels like. In return, you train, you learn, you become the weapon your father prepared you to be. Sophie looked at the hand, at Victoria's face, at the photographs of Margot still lying on the table. And if I say no? Then Marcus Caldwell buys Mare Elegance. The trafficking expands, more Margots, more families destroyed, and you go back to serving soup to men who treat you like furniture. Your choice. Sophie thought about her mother in the hospital, about the bills, about the rent due in 6 days, about Marcus Caldwell's laugh echoing in that restaurant, about her father's voice teaching her codes she thought were games. She thought about the word invisible and how she had worn it for 3 years like a brand. She took Victoria's hand. Tell me what I need to do. Victoria's smile widened. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who had been hunting for 9 years and finally had the right weapon. First, she said, you need to see your mother. Tell her the truth. Or part of it. She deserves to know you are not serving soup anymore. The hospital room was dark except for the television playing with the sound off. Eleanor was asleep, her breathing shallow and labored. The MS had been worse lately. The medication was helping, but it was not enough. It would never be enough. The disease was patient. It would win eventually. Sophie stood in the doorway for a long moment, just watching her mother breathe. Eleanor looked small in the hospital bed, fragile. When Sophie was a child, her mother had seemed invincible. Now she looked like paper that could tear at the wrong touch. She stepped into the room. The floor creaked. Eleanor's eyes opened immediately. "Sophie?" Her voice was rough with sleep. "I am sorry, I did not mean to wake you." Eleanor struggled to sit up. Sophie rushed over to help her, adjusting the pillows, making sure she was comfortable. Her mother's hands were shaking worse than usual. "What are you doing here? It is nearly midnight." Sophie pulled the chair close to the bed. She sat and took her mother's trembling hands in her. "Mom, I need to tell you something. About tonight. About everything." Eleanor's eyes sharpened. Even diminished by disease, her mind was quick. "You lost the restaurant job." It was not a question. "Yes. But I found something else. Someone else. Victoria Rousseau." Eleanor went very still. The name meant something to her. "How do you know that name?" "She found me. She knew Dad. She told me things. About what he really did. About how he died." Eleanor closed her eyes. A single tear tracked down her cheek. "I hoped you would never have to know." "You knew? All this time you knew he did not kill himself?" Eleanor opened her eyes. They were wet, but her voice was firm. "I suspected. Your father changed in those last months. Paranoid. Installing locks, making me promise to take care of you if anything happened. He said he had found something ugly. Something he could not walk away from. I begged him to stop. To run. To choose us over whatever crusade he was on." She gripped Sophie's hands tighter. "He said some things are more important than safety. That he could not live with himself if he let it continue. That you deserve to grow up in a world where men faced consequences for their evil." Sophie felt her throat tighten. "Victoria told me he was trying to stop a trafficking network. That he froze their money. That they killed him for it." Eleanor nodded slowly. "That sounds like David. Always believing he could fix the world through patterns and codes. Never understanding that some men do not care about evidence or truth or justice. They only care about power." She pulled one hand free and touched Sophie's face. "You have that same look. That same determination. Please tell me you are not going to do something stupid in his name." Sophie could not lie to her mother. She had never been good at it. "Victoria wants me to help her stop them. To finish what Dad started. She says I have his gifts, his training. She can give me resources. Protection. A chance to make sure what happened to Dad does not happen to anyone else." Eleanor's face crumpled. She looked suddenly ancient. "No, Sophie, no. I cannot lose you too. You will not lose me. I will be careful. I will be smart. Your father said the same thing. Pride is expensive, Sophie. Revenge is poison. It will consume you." "This is not revenge, Mom. This is justice." Eleanor shook her head, tears flowing freely now. "There is no difference. Not when it is personal. You think you are going after criminals, but what you are really doing is trying to bring your father back. And you cannot. He is gone. Chasing his ghost will only make you one too." Sophie leaned forward, pressing her forehead against her mother's. "I have to do this. For him. For the women who are going through what Margot went through. For us. Victoria is paying off your medical debt. Moving you to a better clinic. I can finally take care of you the way you deserve." Eleanor pulled back. She cupped Sophie's face in both trembling hands. "I do not need a better clinic. I need my daughter alive, safe, here." "I will be here. I promise. This is temporary. 3 months of training, maybe 6 months of work. Then I come home. We start over. Clean slate." Eleanor searched her daughter's face, looking for something, some sign that this would end differently than David's crusade had. "If you do this," she said finally, "you do it for the right reasons. Not for revenge, not for your father's memory. For justice, real justice. The kind that heals people instead of just punishing them." Sophie nodded. "How do I know the difference?" Eleanor's smile was sad. "Justice is about the future. Revenge is about the past. Justice asks what prevents this from happening again. Revenge asks how to make them suffer. If you find yourself enjoying their pain, you have crossed the line." "I will remember that." Eleanor pulled her close. Sophie buried her face in her mother's shoulder and let herself cry. Not the harsh sobs from the alley, but something gentler. The tears of someone saying goodbye to one life and stepping into another. "Be careful," Eleanor whispered into her daughter's hair. "Be smart. And come home to me. because if you die chasing your father's ghost, I will have nothing left to live for. I will come home, Sophie promised. I swear it. They held each other for a long time. Outside, the hospital continued its endless rhythm. Beeping machines, soft footsteps, the occasional code being called over the intercom. Life and death in constant negotiation. When Sophie finally left, Eleanor was asleep again. But her face was peaceful, like she had made her peace with something, or resigned herself to it. Sophie stood in the hallway and texted Victoria, "I am in. Whatever you need, I am ready." The response came immediately. "Good. Come back to the penthouse. There are people you need to meet." The penthouse had transformed. What had been empty space was now a war room. Tables covered with documents, photographs pinned to boards, maps marked with shipping routes, laptops displaying data streams, and people. 5 of them standing around the main table, all turning to look as Sophie entered. Victoria made introductions. "Sophie Bennett, meet your team. Dmitry Volkov, tech and surveillance." The man who stepped forward was in his 60s, broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that had seen too much and trusted too little. He offered a hand that swallowed Sophie's when she shook it. "Your father was good man," Dmitry said. Accent thick. Russian, despite the irony. "We worked together twice. He saved my daughter from bad marriage. I owe him. I help you." Next to him, a woman in her 50s with elegant posture and sharp eyes. Claudette Moreau, voice and accent coach. "I will teach you to sound like you belong in any room, to command attention or disappear depending on need." Beside her, a younger man, Korean-American, expensive suit. James Park, corporate lawyer. "I handle the legal framework. Make sure everything we do can hold up in court. Evidence chains, witness protection, the boring but necessary work." And finally, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and strong hands. Simone Leclerc, image consultant, wardrobe, posture, the physical transformation. "I will teach you to carry yourself like the woman you are about to become." Sophie looked at them all, strangers who were offering to reshape her life based on loyalty to a father she was only now beginning to understand. "Why?" she asked. "Why are you all doing this?" Dmitry spoke first. "Because Russo Syndicate destroy families. My daughter was almost victim. David save her. Now I return favor." Claudette lit a cigarette, despite the no-smoking signs in every building in New York. "Because I ran from an abusive husband for 3 years. Hid. Changed my name. Started over. I know what it is like to be invisible because you have to be, to survive." James adjusted his glasses. "Because I lost a case once. A trafficking victim who should have been protected. Instead, she was deported, sent back to the country where she had been sold. The system failed her because the evidence was buried. I will not let that happen again." Simone smiled gently. "Because my sister was like you once, working 3 jobs, invisible. She died of exhaustion, 32 years old, fell asleep at the wheel driving home from her 3rd shift. I help women now. I make them visible. It is the only way I can honor her." Sophie felt something in her chest loosen. These were not mercenaries. They were people with scars, people who understood what it meant to fight systems that treated humans as disposable. "Thank you," she said. It was all she could manage. Victoria clapped her hands once. "Good. Now that we are all acquainted, let us discuss the timeline. We have 12 weeks to transform Sophie from waitress to consultant. Week 1 through 4, physical and mental foundation. Week 5 through 8, corporate immersion and social training. Week 9 through 12, cryptography and mission-specific preparation." She pulled up a schedule on one of the laptops. 5 a.m. runs, Krav Maga, stress management meditation. You will study Caldwell logistics until you can recite his quarterly reports in your sleep. You will learn wine tasting, golf etiquette, opera appreciation. Everything that marks someone as part of his world. Claudette exhaled smoke. "And I will teach you to speak like you were born to it, not just French. The accent, the tone, the subtle ways the wealthy communicate that they belong, and others do not." Simone added, "We will also work on your physical presentation. Not to change you, to reveal you. The Sophie who existed before poverty taught you to disappear." Dmitry pulled up photographs on another screen. "This is Marcus Caldwell's inner circle, CFO, head of operations, board members. You will memorize their faces, their histories, their weaknesses. When you enter his world, you must know more about his people than they know about themselves. Sophie looked at all of it, the schedule, the faces, the enormity of what they were asking her to become. What if I fail? Victoria met her eyes. Then you fail. But you will fail trying, which is more than most people can say. Your father failed too, Sophie, but he failed fighting. He failed trying to stop something evil. That is not a shameful way to go down. She paused. But I do not think you will fail. I saw you tonight. I saw you stand up to a billionaire in front of 50 people and reduce him to a screaming child. You have the core. We just need to build the armor around it. When do we start? Sophie asked. Dmitri checked his watch. Is past midnight. So we start in 5 hours. Get some sleep. Tomorrow you begin becoming someone new. Sophie did not sleep. She lay in the guest bedroom Victoria had offered, staring at the ceiling, thinking about her father, about all the times he had seemed distant, distracted, working late in his study. She had thought he was grading papers, writing articles, being an academic. He had been fighting monsters, and now she was going to finish the fight. At some point, exhaustion pulled her under. She dreamed of her father teaching her to decode messages hidden in poetry. His gentle voice, his patient hands guiding hers. In the dream, he looked up and smiled. You were always ready, he said. I just needed you to realize it. The alarm went at 4:45. Sophie rose in the dark and dressed in the workout clothes someone had left on a chair. She walked out into the penthouse. Dmitri was waiting in running gear. Central Park, he said. 6 miles. If you fall behind, I do not wait. She followed him out into the pre-dawn cold. They ran through empty streets that would be chaos in a few hours, past buildings where the wealthy slept behind security and doormen, through the park where homeless men slept on benches and early risers walked dogs. Sophie's lungs burned. Her legs screamed. She had not run like this in years, but every time she wanted to stop, she thought of Marcus Caldwell's face, of her father's voice, of Eleanor fighting a disease she could not defeat. She did not fall behind. When they returned, Simone had breakfast waiting. Egg whites, fruit, green tea. Not the coffee and donuts Sophie was used to. You are building a new body, Simone explained. Treat it with respect. After breakfast, Claudette led her to a sound studio built into one of the penthouse rooms. She handed Sophie headphones. Listen, repeat, we strip away Queens, we build Paris. For 6 hours, Sophie repeated phrases. Listened to her own voice played back. Heard the tiny imperfections. The subtle tells that she had not grown up speaking French in expensive schools. Claudette was merciless. Again, your R is too soft. Again, you drop the liaison. Again, you sound American. Again. By noon, Sophie's throat was raw. Her head pounded, but she could hear the difference, the accent shifting, the rhythms changing. Good, Claudette said. It was the first praise Sophie had received. Now we do it for another 6 hours. The days blurred together, running, combat training, voice work, studying corporate documents until the numbers swam. James taught her maritime law. Dmitri taught her surveillance techniques. Simone taught her to walk in heels without looking like she was walking in heels. And through it all, Victoria watched, evaluating, pushing, never quite satisfied. At the end of the first week, Sophie collapsed on her bed at midnight, every muscle aching, her mind spinning with information about shipping manifests and tax havens and the subtle differences between Burgundy and Bordeaux wines. Her phone rang. Eleanor, how are you, sweetheart? Sophie's voice cracked. I am tired, Mom, so tired. I do not know if I can do this. Eleanor's voice was soft. Do you want to quit? No, but I want it to be easier. The important things never are. Your father used to say that difficulty is just proof you are doing something that matters. Sophie closed her eyes. I miss him. So do I. Every day. But Sophie, listen to me. You are not him. You do not have to carry his burden. You can walk away from this, come back. We will figure out the money some other way. Do you want me to walk away? There was a long pause. I want you to survive, Eleanor said finally. Whatever that looks like, even if it means giving up. I'm not giving up. Then do not. But remember what I told you. Justice, not revenge. The moment you start enjoying their pain, you have lost yourself. I will remember. Good, now sleep. Tomorrow will be hard too. The call ended. Sophie lay in the dark and thought about the difference between justice and revenge, about what her father had been fighting for, about whether she was doing this to save others or to hurt the people who had hurt her family. She did not have an answer. But she got up the next morning at 4:45 anyway, and ran, and trained, and slowly, day by day, Sophie Bennett began to disappear. In her place, someone new was being born, someone harder, sharper, someone who could walk into Marcus Caldwell's world and make him believe she belonged there. Someone who could finish what David Bennett had started. The transformation was not just physical, it was psychological. By the end of week 4, Sophie could analyze a corporate balance sheet and spot hidden liabilities. By week 6, she could taste a wine and identify region and vintage. By week 8, she could walk into a room and command it with nothing but posture and silence. But the hardest part was the mirror. Every morning, Sophie looked at her reflection and saw someone else. The hair was different now, cut into a sharp bob, dyed darker. The clothes were different, tailored, expensive. The body was different, lean muscle from the running and combat training. But it was the eyes that changed most. They were colder, more calculating. The eyes of someone who had learned to see people as pieces on a board instead of fellow humans struggling through life. Victoria noticed. "You are becoming Elena," she said one night. "Elena Ashford, the identity we have built for you. But do not lose Sophie entirely. She is your anchor. Without her, you will drift into darkness and not find your way back." "How do I hold on to both?" Victoria poured wine for them both. They sat on the balcony, looking out over the city. "You remember why you are doing this. Not for revenge, not for your father's memory. For the women who are in containers right now. For the futures they will never have if men like Caldwell are not stopped. That is justice. That is worth becoming someone else for." "And what about you?" Sophie asked. "Why are you really doing this?" Victoria was quiet for a long time. "Because I failed, Margot. I was supposed to protect her. I was the older sister, the one with connections and money and power. But I was too busy with my own life, my own career. When she disappeared, I searched for 6 months. 6 months of calling police and politicians and private investigators. And then they found her body. And I realized all my power meant nothing. All my connections could not bring her back." She took a long drink. "So now I use that power differently. I hunt the men who took her, not to bring her back. That is impossible. But to make sure they cannot take anyone else. That is how I sleep at night, by knowing that somewhere there is a girl who did not end up in a container because I stopped the shipment. I never meet her. I never know her name, but she lives. That is enough." Sophie understood then. Victoria was not cold. She was grieving. And grief, when it had nowhere to go, turned into purpose, sometimes noble, sometimes destructive. The line between them was thinner than most people wanted to admit. The weeks passed. Week 9, Dimitri taught Sophie encryption. Week 10, Claudette refined her accent until even native Parisians would be fooled. Week 11, Simone taught her power dynamics. How to enter a room, how to hold a gaze, how to make men like Marcus Caldwell see her as an equal instead of a servant. And in week 12, Victoria gathered them all in the war room. "You are ready?" she said. "Tomorrow night, the Metropolitan Museum Winter Gala. Marcus Caldwell will be there. He is looking for a European strategy consultant, someone who understands French markets, someone who can help him navigate the Mer Elegance acquisition. You are going to make sure he hires you." Sophie looked at the dossier Victoria slid across the table. Inside was everything. Elena Ashford's passport, business cards, a LinkedIn profile with 5 years of history, references from real executives who owed Victoria favors, a legend so deep that even a thorough background check would hold up. "What if he does not bite?" "He will," Victoria said. "Men like Marcus need to feel superior, but they also recognize competence when it threatens them. You will be both. Competent enough to intrigue him, confident enough to make him chase you. By the end of the night, he will be offering you a job. And if something goes wrong?" Dimitri tapped his earpiece. "We are always listening, always watching. You are never alone." Sophie closed the dossier, looked at her team. These people who had spent 12 weeks transforming her from invisible waitress to viable weapon. "Thank you," she said. "All of you, for believing I could do this." James smiled. "We did not believe you could do this. We knew you would. There is a difference. That night, Sophie visited her mother one last time before the mission truly began. Eleanor was sitting up in bed, looking better than she had in months. The new clinic, the new medication, the reduction in stress from not worrying about money. It was all helping. "You look different," Eleanor said. "Not just the hair, your whole presence." "I feel different." "Good different or concerning different?" Sophie sat on the edge of the bed. "I do not know yet. Ask me in 6 months." Eleanor took her daughter's hand. "Remember what I told you. Justice versus revenge. The line is thin, but it exists. Do not cross it." "I will not." "Promise me, Sophie. Promise me that no matter what happens, you will not become the thing you are fighting." Sophie looked into her mother's eyes that had watched David Bennett disappear into darkness, eyes that had buried a husband and rebuilt a life and refused to let disease steal her dignity, eyes that knew the cost of crusades. "I promise, Mom, I will come back to you. And when I do, I will still be me." Eleanor smiled. It was sad but hopeful. "Then go, do what you need to do, but come home." Sophie kissed her mother's forehead and left before the tears could start. She had cried enough. Now it was time to be someone who did not cry. Someone who walked into galas and billionaires' offices and made them believe she belonged. Someone who could destroy Marcus Caldwell from the inside. The next evening, Sophie stood in front of the mirror in the penthouse, wearing an emerald green gown that cost more than 3 months of her old salary. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was subtle but powerful. Her posture was impeccable. She looked like money, like power, like someone who had never served a table in her life. Victoria stood behind her. "You are ready." Sophie met her eyes in the mirror. "For this?" "Yes. For what comes after? I do not know." "None of us do. But we go anyway. Because the alternative is letting men like Caldwell win. And that is not acceptable." Sophie turned around, extended her hand. "Then let us go make a monster notice me." Victoria shook her hand. Her grip was firm, final. "Let us make him hire the woman who will destroy him." And somewhere across the city, Marcus Caldwell prepared for a gala, completely unaware that the waitress he had humiliated 3 months ago was about to walk back into his life, transformed, weaponized, ready to finish what her father had started. The game was beginning. And this time, Sophie Bennett knew all the rules. The transformation of Sophie Bennett into Elena Ashford took 12 weeks. But the real change happened in the spaces between. In the moment her legs wanted to give out at mile 5, and she pushed through anyway. In the instant, she realized she could read a corporate balance sheet faster than the CFO who wrote it. In the quiet hour before dawn, when she decoded her father's journals and understood that he had been preparing her for this her entire life. Week 7 brought the first real test, not from Victoria or the team, from a stranger. Sophie was running her usual route through Central Park. 6 in the morning, the city still half asleep, frost on the grass, her breath visible in the cold air. She had learned to love these runs, the solitude, the rhythm of feet on pavement, the way physical exhaustion quieted the questions that kept her awake at 3 in the morning. She noticed the man on her third lap, tall, early 50s, running the same path but always about 50 yards behind. Gray sweatshirt, good running shoes, the kind of steady pace that suggested military training or serious discipline. By the 4th lap, Sophie's training kicked in. Dimitri had taught her surveillance awareness, how to spot a tail, how to confirm it. She varied her route, took an unexpected turn onto a side path. The man followed. Sophie stopped at a water fountain, bent to drink, watched him in her peripheral vision. He slowed, pretended to stretch, but he was watching her. She turned to face him directly. "Are you following me, or is this just the world's most awkward coincidence?" The man stopped pretending. He walked over, hands visible, non-threatening. Up close, she could see he was handsome in a weathered way, salt and pepper hair, tired eyes that had seen things, a slight limp favoring his left leg. "Agent Daniel Cross, FBI. And yes, I am following you. We need to talk about Victoria Rousseau." Sophie's heart rate spiked, but she kept her face neutral. Dimitri had taught her that too. "I do not know what you are talking about." Daniel smiled. "It was not unkind. You moved into her penthouse 6 weeks ago. Former waitress. No job history before that in New York except 3 low-wage positions. Mother in Mount Sinai with multiple sclerosis. Medical bills that should have crushed you suddenly paid off. And now you are running 6 miles at dawn like someone training for something." He pulled out a badge. FBI, Organized Crime Division. So let me be clear. I am not here to arrest you. I am here to warn you. Victoria Rousseau is under investigation. Money laundering, association with known criminals. Whatever she has recruited you for, it ends badly. People around her tend to disappear or die. Sophie processed this, ran through scenarios. Dimitri had prepared her for law enforcement contact. Stay calm, reveal nothing, redirect. I am her assistant. I help with her schedule, her correspondence. She pays well, and she gave me health insurance for my mother. That is all. Daniel's expression said he did not believe her, but respected the lie. Right. An assistant who does Krav Maga at dawn, who studies corporate law in the afternoons, whose accent shifted from Queens to something I cannot quite place in 6 weeks. He stepped closer, not threatening, almost concerned. Look, I do not know what story she told you, what crusade she sold you on. But Victoria Rousseau is not a hero. She is a vigilante with resources, and the FBI has been watching her for 2 years. Whatever you think you are doing, you are being used. Sophie met his eyes, held his gaze without flinching. Thank you for the warning, Agent Cross, but I am not being used. I am exactly where I want to be. She turned to leave. He caught her arm, gently, just enough to stop her. Can I at least buy you coffee? Off the record, just 2 people talking. Sophie looked at his hand on her arm, at his face, at the genuine concern there. This was not a federal agent running a sting. This was a man who had lost enough people that he tried to save strangers in Central Park. 1 coffee, then you leave me alone. Deal. They sat in a diner near the park, the kind of place that served eggs and toast and did not care about anything except whether you tipped. Daniel ordered black coffee. Sophie ordered the same, though she wanted cream and sugar. Elena Ashford drank black coffee. Sophie Bennett did not. Tell me about Victoria, Daniel said. How did you meet her? Sophie sipped the bitter coffee and considered how much truth to give him. She knew my father, a long time ago. He helped her once. She returned the favor. Your father, David Bennett, linguistics professor, died in San Francisco 3 years ago. Jumped from the Golden Gate Bridge. He did not jump. The words came out before Sophie could stop them. Daniel leaned forward. You think he was murdered? I know he was murdered. By who? Sophie shook her head. I cannot tell you that. Not yet. Not until I have proof. And Victoria is helping you get proof. Yes. Daniel sat back. He looked tired, like he had been having this conversation for years with different people, and it always ended the same way. Let me tell you a story, he said. 3 years ago, my wife Laura died. Cancer. I was with the Bureau working organized crime. I was never home, always chasing cases, thinking I was making a difference. She got sick, and I did not notice until it was too late. Stage 4 by the time they found it. He stared into his coffee. She died, and I realized I had spent 20 years chasing criminals while the person I loved most disappeared in front of me. So I made a promise. No more obsession. No more crusades. Do the job, but do not let it consume me. He looked up at Sophie. Then I started investigating Victoria Rousseau, and I saw the pattern. She recruits people. People with skills, people with anger, people who have lost something and want revenge. She aims them at targets, and she does not care what happens to them after. 3 people in the last 5 years. All ended badly. What happened to them? 1 is in prison, falsified evidence because Victoria pushed too hard. 1 is dead, killed by the people she was investigating. And 1 disappeared. Witness protection, maybe. Or buried somewhere no one will find her. Daniel reached across the table, put his hand over Sophie's. I do not want you to be number 4. Sophie looked at his hand. Warm, calloused. The hand of someone who worked for a living, who had buried a wife and rebuilt a life and was trying to save a stranger, because he could not save the people who mattered. She should pull away, should maintain distance, should remember that this man was FBI and could destroy everything. But she did not pull away. Why do you care? You do not know me. Because you remind me of Laura, before she got sick, determined, brilliant, convinced she could fix the world through sheer willpower. I could not save her from cancer. Maybe I can save you from yourself. I do not need saving. Everyone needs saving. The question is whether they let someone help. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the city was waking up. People rushing to jobs they hated, fighting traffic, living lives of quiet desperation. I have to go, Sophie said. Thank you for the coffee and the warning, but I am not stopping. Then at least be careful, and if you need help, real help, call me. He slid a card across the table. Personal cell phone number handwritten on the back. Sophie took it, slipped it into her pocket. I will not need it, but thank you. She left before he could say anything else. Walked 12 blocks before she was sure he was not following. Then she called Victoria. FBI knows I'm with you. I know, Daniel Cross, widower, good agent, predictable. Did you expect this? I expected everything. Do you want to quit? No. Good. Keep him close. Might be useful. Sophie hung up and looked at the card in her hand. Daniel Cross. A man trying to save her from a crusade he did not understand. A man who had already lost everything and was trying to keep the world from eating someone else. She should throw the card away. She kept it instead. The weeks continued. Sophie saw Daniel 3 more times. Always by accident, that felt planned. Coffee, walks in the park, conversations that circled around what they both knew but neither would say. He told her about Laura, about their wedding, about the last conversation they had before the morphine took her ability to speak, about the guilt of chasing criminals while she died alone. Sophie told him about her mother, about Lion before the fall, about the weight of watching someone you love disappear piece by piece. She did not tell him about David's real work, about the Russo syndicate, about Marcus Caldwell, but she told him enough truth that the lies felt less heavy. Week 9 brought another complication. Sophie was at an art gallery in Chelsea, part of Elena Ashford's cover. European art consultant needed to be seen at galleries, needed to build a presence in the cultural world Marcus Caldwell tried to inhabit. She was studying a painting when someone bumped into her from behind. A young woman, mid-20s, carrying a large sketchbook, papers scattered across the floor. Oh God, I am so sorry. The woman knelt to gather her drawings. Sophie knelt to help. The sketches were beautiful, delicate, children's book illustrations, a rabbit in a waistcoat, a girl with wings, magic rendered in pencil and watercolor. These are lovely, Sophie said. The woman blushed. Thank you. I am Claire. I am trying to break into publishing, but everyone says children's books are dead. The kids only want screens now. Sophie handed her the sketches. Kids will always want stories. The medium does not matter if the story is good. Claire smiled. It was genuine, unguarded. The smile of someone who had not learned to weaponize kindness yet. I am Elena, art consultant, European markets. They shook hands. Claire's grip was light, uncertain. Do you want to get coffee? Claire asked. I never meet people who appreciate art anymore. Everyone is in finance or tech. All they talk about is money. Sophie should say no, should maintain distance, should not create connections that could complicate the mission. But there was something about Claire's openness that pulled at her, a reminder of who Sophie had been before poverty taught her to hide. Coffee sounds good. They went to a cafe around the corner, talked about art and books and the loneliness of creative work. Claire was funny, self-deprecating. She talked about her failed attempts to get published, about the stacks of rejection letters, about the father who thought her work was frivolous. What does your father do? Sophie asked. Business, shipping, or logistics or something boring. He makes a lot of money and works all the time. We are not close. Sophie felt something cold settle in her stomach. Does he have a name? Marcus Caldwell. You have probably never heard of him. He is one of those rich people who buy politicians but stay out of the news. Sophie's coffee cup stopped halfway to her lips. She set it down carefully. Caldwell Logistics. Claire looked surprised. You have heard of it? I consult on European shipping markets. His name comes up. Sophie's mind was racing. This was Marcus Caldwell's daughter, the man she was being trained to destroy. And she was sitting across from her drinking coffee and talking about children's books. What is he like? Sophie asked. Your father. Claire's expression closed slightly. Driven, distant. He wanted a son. Got me, instead. I do not think he has ever forgiven me for not being what he needed. Have you tried talking to him? Claire laughed. It was bitter. You cannot talk to Marcus Caldwell. You can only listen while he tells you how you are disappointing him. I stopped trying years ago. Sophie felt an unexpected surge of sympathy. Whatever sins Marcus Caldwell carried, this young woman was not responsible for them. She was collateral damage, a casualty of a father who valued empire over family. They exchanged numbers, started texting, met for coffee twice more over the next 2 weeks. Claire talked about her art, about her dreams of publishing a book that would make invisible children feel seen. Sophie listened and offered encouragement, and tried not to think about what she was going to do to Claire's father. Victoria noticed, "You are getting close to the daughter. She is innocent. She knows nothing about his real business. Everyone is innocent until they are not. Do not let sympathy compromise the mission." "I am not compromising anything. I am building cover. Marcus will trust me more if his daughter vouches for me." Victoria studied her. "Is that what you are doing? Or are you trying to save her?" "Both. Is that a problem?" Victoria poured wine. They were on the penthouse balcony. The city spread below them like a circuit board of light and darkness. "Just remember what I told you about the other three. They all thought they could save people, thought they could separate the guilty from the innocent. It does not work that way. When you burn down an empire, everyone inside feels the heat. Then we make sure Claire gets out before the building collapses. You think she will leave her father no matter what you show her? If the evidence is strong enough." Victoria shook her head. "Blood is thicker than evidence. She will defend him, make excuses, convince herself you are lying, and when you destroy him anyway, she will hate you for it." "Hate. Then she hates me, but at least she is alive and free." Noble, naive, but noble. Sophie drank her wine and watched the city, and wondered if Victoria was right, if she was trying to save Claire out of genuine compassion or out of guilt for what was coming. The line between them felt very thin. Week 11 brought the cryptography work. Dimitri delivered David Bennett's journals, 14 leather notebooks spanning 20 years. Victoria had kept them in a vault in Zurich. Now they sat on Sophie's desk like archaeological artifacts from another life. She opened the first one with trembling hands. Her father's handwriting, precise, economical. The script of someone who thought in patterns and systems. The early journals were professional. Client codes, payment schedules, technical details of encryption systems. But as she read deeper, she found something else, hidden in the margins, encoded in techniques he had taught her as a child. Love letters to Eleanor. He had written them in Vigenère cipher, using Baudelaire's poems as the key. Sophie spent 3 days decoding them, each one a small window into a marriage she had not fully understood. My Eleanor, one read, "You ask me why I do this work, why I help men I despise hide money they stole. The answer is you, our life, the world I am building for Sophie. But lately I wonder if I am building it on sand. If the foundation is corrupt, can anything built on it stand?" Another dated 2 years later. "I found something today. Something that makes all the other sins look small. Children. They are trafficking children. I have the accounts, the proof. But if I expose it, we lose everything. Our home, our safety, Sophie's future. How do I choose between justice and my family? How did I become the kind of man who has to choose?" Sophie read through tears. Her father had not been cold, had not been distant. He had been drowning in moral complexity, trying to protect his family while his conscience tore him apart. The last entry was dated 3 days before his death. "If you are reading this, Sophie, I failed, but I want you to understand why. I found the key, the cipher that locks the Russo accounts. $40 million they cannot access without me. I told them I would release it to Interpol unless they stop the trafficking. They have given me 72 hours to reconsider. I will not reconsider. I know what that means. I know they will come for me. But some things matter more than survival. You matter more. The world you will inherit matters more. I am making it a little cleaner, a little safer, even if it costs me everything. Remember the games I taught you, the codes, the patterns. They were not just games. I was preparing you for this moment, for the choice I'm making. Be braver than I was, be smarter, finish what I started. I love you. Tell your mother I love her. And do not cry for me. I died fighting. That is more than most men can say." Sophie closed the journal and sat in the dark. Her father had known, had chosen death over compromise, had spent his last days encoding instructions for her in journals he hoped she would find. She had been angry at him for 3 years, angry that he left them, angry that he jumped, angry that he chose whatever crusade he was on over his family. Now she understood. He had not chosen the crusade over them. He had chosen their future over his present, had sacrificed himself so they could live in a world with one less monster. She called her mother. "Mom, I need to tell you something about Dad, about why he died." Eleanor's voice was soft. I know why he died, sweetheart. I always knew. He told me the night before, said he had to stop something evil, that if he did nothing, he would not be able to look at himself in the mirror. I begged him to run, to choose us, but he said choosing us meant making the world safer for us. And the only way to do that was to stand. You knew this whole time? I suspected. I could never prove it. But I knew David did not kill himself out of shame. He killed himself by standing in the path of monsters and refusing to move. Why did you not tell me? Because you were 21 and grieving, and I did not want you to inherit his war. I wanted you to have a life, a future, not a crusade. But here I am anyway. Eleanor laughed. It was sad. Yes, here you are, my stubborn, brilliant daughter who cannot walk away from a fight any more than her father could. Just promise me you will be smarter than he was. Come home alive. I promise. Sophie hung up and opened the next journal, found the Bitcoin wallet information, the 40 million in frozen Russo accounts, her father's insurance policy, his last gift to her. She transferred it to an account Dimitri had created. Untraceable. Clean. Money that had been stolen from criminals who had stolen it from victims. She would use it for something good, for the foundation Victoria was building, for the women who survived trafficking and needed help rebuilding, for Eleanor's medical care, for Claire's art school tuition, maybe, when this was all over. Blood money turned to healing, the way her father would have wanted. Week 12 arrived like an execution date, the Metropolitan Museum Winter Gala. Sophie stood in front of the mirror in the penthouse, wearing the emerald green gown Victoria had chosen. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was subtle but transformative. Her posture was impeccable. She looked nothing like the waitress who had served Marcus Caldwell 3 months ago. She looked like money, like power, like someone who had been born to rooms like the one she was about to enter. The team gathered around her. Dimitri checked her earpiece. Claudette adjusted her pronunciation one last time. James reviewed the legal framework if things went wrong. Simone ensured every detail of her appearance was perfect. Victoria stood back and watched. You are ready. What if he recognizes me? He will not. Men like Marcus do not see faces. They see uniforms, roles. You were furniture to him. Now you are a person. He will not connect the two. And if something goes wrong? Dimitri tapped his earpiece. We are always listening. You are never alone. Sophie took a breath, let it out, became Elena Ashford completely, the woman who had studied in Zurich, who consulted for European firms, who spoke 5 languages and could analyze a shipping contract in 3, who was competent and expensive and utterly unimpressed by American billionaires. Let us go. The gala was everything Sophie expected. The Metropolitan Museum transformed into a winter palace. Ice sculptures, white floral arrangements the size of cars. A string quartet playing in the Temple of Dendur. Men in tuxedos and women in gowns that cost more than most people made in a year. Sophie walked in alone, head high, no hesitation. She moved through the crowd like she belonged, stopped to examine an Egyptian artifact, a limestone relief depicting a trade agreement from 3,000 years ago. She was studying the hieroglyphics when she felt someone approach from behind. You look like you are analyzing a merger, not appreciating art. The voice was familiar, arrogant, loud. Marcus Caldwell. Sophie turned slowly, let 3 seconds pass before acknowledging him. A power move Simone had taught her. It is not just art, she said. Her accent was perfect, European but unplaceable. It is a record of a negotiation. The pharaoh thinks he won. But if you read the fine print along the border, you see he gave away his grain reserves for temporary peace, a classic mistake. Short-term gain for long-term ruin. She met his eyes, showed no recognition. Something many modern executives repeat. Marcus blinked. He was not used to being lectured by beautiful women at galas. I am Marcus Caldwell, he said, extending his hand like she should be impressed. Sophie took it briefly. Her grip was firm. Then she let go and turned back to the artifact. Elena Ashford. Ashford, I have not heard of you. That is because I make a point of not mattering to people in New York. I work in Zurich, where the money is real and the egos are smaller. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he stepped closer. Zurich. Finance? Corporate restructuring. I specialize in cross-border logistics, helping European firms navigate American markets and vice versa. Sophie could see the wheels turning. She had said exactly what Victoria predicted would hook him. Logistics, European markets. the two things he needed most. I own a logistics company, Marcus said. Biggest shipping operation on the Atlantic. Sophie looked at him with mild amusement. Caldwell Logistics. Yes, I read about your attempted acquisition in Greece, the one that failed because you did not understand the labor unions. Marcus's face reddened. That was a strategic withdrawal. Of course it was. And the Titanic was just stopping for ice. She checked her watch. Vintage Cartier. Another detail Simone had insisted on. If you will excuse me. She started to walk away. Marcus followed. Perfect. Wait, Miss Ashford. I am trying to acquire a French shipping line. Mère Elegance, but I am facing resistance from the board. They say I do not understand the culture. Sophie stopped, turned, let him see her assessing him. You do not. You are trying to bully your way through a market that values finesse. It will not work. Could you make it work? Sophie smiled. It was not kind. I could, but I do not work cheap. And I do not work for men who do not listen. I will listen. Name your price. She let him wait. Let the silence stretch. 25,000 retainer, 500 per hour consulting fee, and complete strategic control. You do not second-guess me. You do not override me. You hired me for expertise. Let me use it. Marcus looked like he had been punched. No one talked to him like this. No one made demands. But he was also intrigued. She could see it. The challenge. The woman who did not fall over herself to please him. Done. Monday, 10 a.m. My office. Sophie corrected him without blinking. 10:30. I do not work before 10:30. She walked away before he could respond. Disappeared into the crowd. Found the exit. Did not look back. In the car outside, Dimitri was already reviewing audio. Perfect. He is hooked. Victoria smiled from the back seat. I told you. Men like Marcus always chase what dismisses them. Monday, you walk into his world. And we start the real work. Sophie removed the earpiece, looked out at the city passing by. She thought about Claire, about Daniel, about Eleanor in the hospital, about David's journals and the choice he had made, about the difference between justice and revenge. She thought about Marcus Caldwell's face when she walked away from him, the confusion, the intrigue, the beginning of his downfall. Monday, Sophie Bennett would disappear completely. Elena Ashford would walk into Caldwell Tower and begin the infiltration, would gain his trust, find his secrets, decode his crimes, would finish what her father started. But tonight, just for tonight, she let herself be Sophie, the girl from Lyon who loved poetry and word games and believed the world could be better. Tomorrow, she would be the weapon. Tonight, she was still partly human. The car pulled up to the penthouse. Sophie got out and looked up at the building. 40 stories of glass and steel. A fortress. A prison. A place where she was becoming someone else. Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Saw you at the gala. You looked good. Be careful. Sophie stared at the message. He had been there, watching, still trying to save her from herself. She texted back, I'm always careful. His response came immediately. No, you are not. But I will be there anyway, when you need me. Sophie put the phone away and went inside. Rode the elevator to the penthouse. Walked past the war room where her team was celebrating. Found her bedroom and closed the door. She stood in front of the mirror and looked at Elena Ashford. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, perfect armor. Then she removed it all, wiped away the makeup, let her hair down, put on old sweats from her life before, looked at Sophie Bennett in the reflection. Tomorrow, you disappear. But remember who you are. Remember why you are doing this. Not for revenge, for justice. For the women who do not have your advantages. For the future your father died to create. She thought of Eleanor's words. Justice heals, revenge just punishes. She thought of Victoria's warnings. Everyone inside the building feels the heat when you burn it down. She thought of Claire's smile, of Daniel's concern, of her father's last words. Be braver than I was, be smarter, finish what I started. Sophie looked at the woman in the mirror and made a promise. I will finish it, but I will do it my way, with compassion where I can, with mercy where possible. And when I destroy Marcus Caldwell, I will make sure the innocent are clear of the blast radius. She turned off the light and got into bed, closed her eyes, tried to sleep. But sleep did not come easily, because tomorrow was the beginning of the end. And she was not sure yet whether that end would make her a hero or a monster. The difference, she suspected, would come down to choices she had not made yet. Moments she could not predict, tests she might fail. But she would face them anyway, because walking away now meant her father died for nothing. meant the Russo syndicate continued, meant more Margaux and more containers in more ports. And Sophie Bennett, former waitress, invisible woman, daughter of a cryptographer who died fighting monsters, was done being invisible. Monday morning was 4 days away. 4 days to prepare, to study, to become Elena Ashford so completely that even she forgot where the mask ended and the woman began. 4 days until she walked into Marcus Caldwell's office and started dismantling his empire from the inside. 4 days until the real war began. Sophie finally slept, and in her dreams, her father stood in a garden in Lyon and smiled and said the words he had written in his journal. "You were always ready. I just needed you to realize it." She woke at dawn and started running, because Elena Ashford did not sleep late. Elena Ashford was disciplined and driven and ready for anything. And Sophie Bennett, hidden beneath the mask, held on to one truth. She was going to finish this, whatever it cost, however it ended. The game was about to begin, and this time, she knew all the rules. Monday morning arrived cold and clear. Sophie stood at the base of Caldwell Tower and looked up, 50 stories of glass and steel rising into a sky the color of brushed aluminum. The building had Marcus's name on it in letters 3 feet tall, a monument to ego, a fortress built on cargo containers filled with things the world was not supposed to see. She walked through the revolving doors at exactly 10:30. Not 10:29, not 10:31. Precision mattered. Elena Ashford was never late and never early. She existed in a space where time bent to her schedule, not the other way around. The lobby was marble and chrome, security desks staffed by men in suits with earpieces, expensive art on the walls chosen by consultants who understood the language of power. Sophie approached the desk with the confidence of someone who had entered 1,000 buildings like this. "Elena Ashford for Marcus Caldwell, 10:30. The security guard checked his list, made a call, handed her a key card. "Executive elevator, 50th floor, Mr. Caldwell is expecting you." The elevator was glass on 3 sides. As it rose, Sophie watched the city fall away beneath her. From this height, people looked like ants. Cars like toys, the illusion of power that tall buildings created. The sense that from up here, you could control the world below. The doors opened directly into Marcus's office. No reception area, no waiting room. You either belonged here or you did not. Marcus stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, hands in his pockets, looking out at the harbor. He turned when he heard the elevator. "Miss Ashford, punctual, I like that." Sophie stepped into the space, took it in with a glance. Mahogany desk the size of a small car, leather chair. Ego wall covered with photos of Marcus shaking hands with senators and celebrities. And behind the desk, a painting. Winslow Homer seascape. Storm clouds over rough water. She filed the painting away. Dmitri had briefed her. Safes were often hidden behind art. "Shall we begin?" Sophie said. Her accent was perfect, her posture impeccable. She did not wait for permission. She sat in one of the chairs and opened her laptop. Marcus blinked. He was used to people waiting for his cues, but he recovered quickly, sat behind his desk. The power position. "I need help navigating the Mer Elegance acquisition. The board is stalling, creating regulatory obstacles. I need someone who understands how the French do business." Sophie pulled up a file, the research James had prepared. Every board member, every regulation, every weakness. The problem is not how the French do business. The problem is you are treating this like a hostile takeover. In France, relationships matter more than money. You need to make them want to sell to you, not force them. So make them want to sell. Sophie looked at him over her laptop. "That will take time and trust, neither of which can be bought. I'm paying you to find a way." "You are paying me to tell you the truth. The truth is that Victoria Rousseau will block you as long as she sees you as a threat to her company's values. You need to convince her you are an ally, not a conqueror." Marcus leaned back, studied her. "You know Victoria." "I know of her. We have mutual contacts in Zurich. She has a reputation. Intelligent, principled, deeply loyal to Mer Elegance. You will not bully her into submission." "Then what do I do?" Sophie closed her laptop, met his eyes. "You let me handle her, but you have to give me complete access. Financial records, corporate structure, strategic plans. I cannot craft a presentation without understanding what I am selling." Marcus's jaw tightened. He did not like sharing information. Control was his currency. "Some of that is confidential." Sophie stood, put her laptop in her bag, "Then find someone else. I do not work with partial information. Either you trust me or you do not. Your choice. She walked to the elevator, pressed the button, let him feel her leaving. Wait. She turned, said nothing, just waited. Fine. I will have my CFO send you everything. But this does not leave this building. If I find out you shared it with anyone, you will what? Sophie's voice was ice. Sue me? I have worked for Saudi princes and Russian oligarchs. Your threats are amateur hour. The elevator arrived. Sophie stepped in, turned to face him. Tomorrow, same time, have the files ready. And Mr. Caldwell, do not waste my time again. The doors closed on his stunned expression. In the lobby, Dimitri's voice crackled in her nearly invisible earpiece. Perfect, he is hooked. Angry, but hooked. Sophie walked out into the cold. Let herself breathe. That had been a risk. Walking out, challenging him. But men like Marcus respected power, and power meant being willing to leave. Her phone buzzed, a text from Claire. Coffee this afternoon? I finished a new illustration. Want to show you. Sophie hesitated. Every interaction with Claire was a complication. A connection that could compromise everything. But refusing would raise suspicion. She texted back. 3 o'clock, same cafe. The weeks blurred together. Sophie established a routine. 10:30 arrival at Caldwell Tower. Work until 6. Reviewing shipping manifests. Analyzing corporate structures. Looking for the patterns her father had trained her to see. Marcus began to rely on her. She caught errors in his presentations, identified weaknesses in his negotiating positions, taught him the subtle art of European business relationships, and slowly, carefully, she gained access. First to the financial systems, then to the strategic planning documents, then to the shipping schedules that showed what cargo moved where and when. Dimitri analyzed everything she sent, built a map of the Russo operation, shipment patterns, payment flows, the infrastructure of human misery hidden in legitimate business. But they still did not have the black book, the physical ledger Marcus supposedly kept, the handwritten record of the real transactions. Without it, everything else was circumstantial, suggestive but not conclusive. Week 3 brought the first real complication. Marcus decided to have lunch catered from L'Étoile d'Argent, a gesture to impress a visiting senator, proof that he appreciated fine dining even if he did not understand it. Sophie saw the restaurant name on the schedule and felt her stomach drop. She texted Victoria immediately. He is ordering from L'Étoile. Henri might be there. Victoria's response was instant. Cannot cancel without raising suspicion. You will have to manage it. The lunch was scheduled for Thursday. Sophie spent 3 days preparing, studying Henri's patterns, his tells, the way he looked at people. She had Simone adjust her makeup slightly. Different eyeshadow, sharper liner, changed her hair part. Small things that altered perception. But she knew the truth. If Henri looked at her directly, really looked, he would know. Thursday arrived. Sophie positioned herself by the window in the conference room, back to the door where the food would enter. She had her laptop open. A report on screen, the picture of someone absorbed in work. She heard the cart before she saw it, the distinct rattle of wheels on marble, the soft clink of silver and china. She did not turn around. Henri's voice, older than she remembered, more tired. Good afternoon. Where would you like the setup? Marcus waved toward the conference table. There is fine. And be quick about it. The senator will be here in 10 minutes. Sophie kept her eyes on her laptop, Dimitri's voice in her ear. Steady. Do not react. You are Elena. He has never met Elena. She could feel Henri moving around the room, setting plates, arranging silverware. The ritual of service she knew so well. She had been on the other side of it for 3 years. Invisible labor, unnoticed care. Henri came closer. He was setting water glasses. Sophie saw his reflection in the window. He glanced at her, then stopped, looked again. His brow furrowed. He tilted his head slightly. Mademoiselle, Henri said, his voice uncertain. Have we met before? The room went still. Marcus looked up from his phone. The CFO stopped mid-sentence. Sophie turned slowly, looked at Henri with the full force of Elena Ashford's disdain. Let 3 seconds of silence pass, a power move that said this interaction was beneath her. I believe the wine is meant for the glass, not the air, monsieur. And no, we have not met. I do not frequent establishments where the staff stares at guests. Her voice was cutting, cold, the tone of someone who had never served a day in her life, who had been born to money and carried it like a birthright. Henri recoiled. The authority in her voice shattered his recognition. He looked at her clothes, the expensive suit, the Cartier watch, the absolute confidence. This could not be the frightened waitress he had fired 3 months ago. That girl had been invisible, apologetic. This woman was a blade. "Apologies, madame," Henri stammered. "You reminded me of someone. My mistake." "Clearly," Sophie said. She turned back to her laptop, dismissed him completely. Marcus laughed. "This is Elena Ashford, Henri. She eats people like you for breakfast. Now finish setting up and get out." Henri completed his work with shaking hands. Left without another word. Sophie did not watch him go, did not let her posture relax, did not breathe until the elevator doors closed. Then she excused herself, walked to Marcus's private bathroom, locked the door, leaned against the sink, and fought the panic that wanted to consume her. Her hands were shaking. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it. She had been seconds away from exposure, from everything collapsing. Dimitri's voice in her ear. "You did it. You sold it. He believes you are Elena." Sophie splashed cold water on her face, looked at herself in the mirror. Elena stared back. Perfect makeup, perfect hair, perfect mask. But underneath, Sophie was still there, terrified, remembering what it felt like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to be nothing. She texted Victoria. "Too close, I almost broke." Victoria's response was immediate. "But you did not. That is what matters. The mission continues." Sophie dried her face, reapplied lipstick, became Elena again, walked back into the conference room like nothing had happened. But something had shifted. The near miss reminded her how fragile this all was, how easily it could shatter, how much was riding on her ability to maintain the mask. Week 5 brought Claire into the office. Marcus had invited her to see where he worked, a rare gesture, an attempt at connection that was 20 years too late. Sophie was in a meeting when Claire arrived. She looked up and saw her through the glass wall, Claire in jeans and a paint-stained sweater, looking uncomfortable and out of place among the suits and marble. Their eyes met. Claire's face lit up. She waved. Sophie's heart sank. After the meeting, Claire found her in the hallway. "Elena, I did not know you worked with my dad." "Small world," Sophie said, trying to keep her voice neutral. "He hired me to consult on the European acquisition." "That is amazing." Claire's enthusiasm was genuine, unguarded. "Maybe you can help him be less of a workaholic. He never stops, never has time for anything except business. I am a consultant, not a therapist." Claire laughed. "Fair. Hey, are you free for dinner tonight? There is a new gallery opening in Tribeca. Lots of emerging artists. I think you would love it." Sophie should say no, should maintain distance, should remember that this friendship was a complication waiting to explode. But Claire's openness pulled at her, the reminder that not everyone in this tower was corrupt, that some people were just trying to find their place in a world that did not make space for them. "Dinner sounds good." They met at a small restaurant near the gallery. Claire talked about her art, about the children's book she was trying to publish, about her dream of making stories for kids who felt invisible, who needed to see themselves as heroes. "What about your family?" Sophie asked. "Your father. Do you ever talk to him about your work?" Claire's expression clouded. "He does not get it. He thinks art is frivolous, that real work is spreadsheets and acquisitions. I stopped trying to explain years ago." "Have you ever asked him why he works so much?" "Because he is Marcus Caldwell. Because building an empire is the only thing he knows how to do." Sophie sipped her wine, thought about the files she had seen, the shipping manifests, the coded transactions, the empire built on suffering. "What if you learned something about him? Something terrible? Would you want to know?" Claire looked at her strangely. "What kind of question is that?" "Just hypothetical. If someone you loved was doing something wrong, something that hurt people, would you want to know?" Claire was quiet for a moment. "I think I would. Because not knowing does not make you innocent. It just makes you complicit by ignorance. If my father was hurting people and I could stop it, I would want that chance." Sophie felt something tighten in her chest. Claire would want to know, which meant she would have to tell her, eventually, before the end. The thought made her sick. Week 6 brought progress. Marcus started bringing Sophie to private meetings, strategy sessions where the real business was discussed. She met the CFO, the head of operations, the lawyers who crafted the structures that hid the truth, and she started to see the pattern. Shipments that left from Newark, arrived in Rotterdam, then disappeared from the manifests. Payments that went to shell companies in the Cayman Islands, coded references and emails to cargo types that did not match the official paperwork. Dmitry built a network diagram, showed her how it connected to the Russo syndicate, to trafficking routes across the Atlantic, to the same infrastructure that had killed Margot, that had led to David's murder. "You are close," Dmitry said one night. "Maybe 2 more weeks, then we have enough for the FBI, for Interpol, for everyone." But still no black book. Sophie asked Marcus about it obliquely, mentioned that digital records were vulnerable, that paper was more secure. He smiled like she had passed a test. "You understand. Everyone wants everything in the cloud, but clouds can be hacked. Paper cannot. The important things I keep in writing, safe, controlled." He did not show her, but he confirmed it existed. Week 7 brought the opening she needed. Marcus had closed a major contract, tax loopholes that would save him millions. He was drinking scotch at 11 p.m. in his office, celebrating alone because he had no one else. Sophie had stayed late, intentionally, waiting for this. She knocked on his open door. "Still working?" Marcus waved her in. His tie was loose, his jacket off. He looked tired, human. "Come celebrate with me. We just saved $10 million in taxes." He poured her scotch. They sat by the windows and looked out at the city. "Why do you do this?" Sophie asked. "You have more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes. Why keep building?" Marcus stared into his glass. "You want the truth? Because I grew up with nothing. My father was a dock worker in Boston, drunk most of the time, beat me the rest. I wore the same clothes to school every day for 3 years. Kids made fun of me, called me trash." He took a long drink. "I built this so I would never be that kid again, so no one could ever look down on me. But you know what is funny? I have all this, and I am still that kid inside, still waiting for someone to tell me I do not belong." Sophie felt something unexpected. Sympathy. This man was a monster, but he was also a wounded child who never healed, who built an empire to prove his worth to people who did not care. "Your daughter cares," Sophie said quietly. "Claire, she just wants you to see her." Marcus laughed bitterly. "I do not know how to be a father. I know how to be a CEO, how to win, how to dominate. But sitting at a dinner table talking about feelings, I am a failure at that." "It is not too late." "Yes, it is. I made my choice years ago. Empire over family, money over love. You cannot go back from that." He stood and walked to the painting, the Winslow Homer, pressed something on the frame. The painting swung open. Behind it was a wall safe. Sophie's heart rate spiked. This was it. "You said paper was safer," Marcus said, spinning the combination. 381427. "You were right. Everything important is in here." He opened the safe. Inside were stacks of documents, legal papers, and a black leather notebook. The black book. Marcus pulled it out, held it like scripture. "This is the real business. Every deal, every payment, every shipment. The truth the world does not get to see." He opened it, showed her a page, coded entries, dates, amounts, the cipher her father had taught her to read. "Impressive," Sophie said. Her throat was dry. "May I?" Marcus hesitated, then handed it to her, the scotch and loneliness making him careless. Sophie opened the book, scanned the pages, recognized the pattern immediately. Visionaire cipher with a numeric key. She could decode it in her sleep. She flipped through 47 pages, each one a record of crimes, evidence that would bury him. She reached into her purse, pulled out what looked like a lipstick case, Dimitri's creation, high-resolution camera. "This is brilliant work," she said, holding the book with one hand, opening the lipstick with the other. "You should write a memoir someday." Marcus laughed, turned to refill his glass. Sophie pressed the button. The camera was silent. She flipped pages. Click, click, click. 20 seconds. 30. 47 pages captured. Marcus turned back. Sophie had already closed the book and set it on his desk, the camera back in her purse. "Thank you for sharing," she said. "It is good to know you trust me." Marcus took the book, put it back in the safe, spun the combination, closed the painting. "I do trust you," he said. "You are the first person in years who tells me the truth, who does not just say what I want to hear." He sat down heavily. The scotch was hitting him now. "Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I had made different choices. If I had chosen Claire over the business. If I had been the father she deserved." Sophie felt the knife of guilt twist in her stomach. This man was opening up to her, showing vulnerability, and she was going to use it to destroy him. "It is not too late," she said again, knowing it was a lie, knowing that in 2 weeks, maybe less, his world would end. Marcus smiled sadly. You are kind to say that, but we both know it is too late. I am what I am, the monster I built myself into. He looked at her with tired eyes. Do not make my mistakes, Elena. Whatever you are chasing, whatever you think will make you whole, make sure it is worth the cost. Sophie stood. I should go. You need rest. Marcus nodded, did not get up, just sat there with his scotch and his regrets. Sophie rode the elevator down in silence, Dimitri's voice in her ear. You got it. All 47 pages. Clean captures. We have him. Sophie walked out into the night. The cold air hit her like a slap. She walked 3 blocks before she stopped, leaned against a building, felt the tears come. She had just condemned a man who had shown her his wounds, who had admitted his failures, who was broken and alone and aware of it, and she had done it without hesitation. Her phone rang him. Daniel, I need to see you. Now? Now? They met in Central Park, midnight, the city asleep around them. Daniel looked angry. I know what you are doing. Sophie's blood went cold. What do you mean? I have been following the case. Caldwell Logistics. The patterns match trafficking operations. And you just walked out of his building carrying evidence. Do not lie to me, Sophie. I am FBI. I see things. Sophie sat on a bench, too tired to keep lying. He is trafficking for the Russo Syndicate. I have proof now. 47 pages of coded ledger entries. Dates, amounts, routes, everything you need to take him down. Daniel sat beside her. Then give it to me. Let the FBI handle it. You have done enough. I cannot. Not yet. Victoria needs it for something else first. Daniel grabbed her shoulders, turned her to face him. Victoria does not care about justice. She cares about revenge, and she is using you to get it. Please, Sophie, give me the evidence. Let me do this the right way. What is the right way? Letting lawyers bury it. Letting Caldwell buy his way out. Letting the Russos continue operating while bureaucrats argue jurisdiction? Daniel's grip softened. I know the system is broken, but vigilante justice is not the answer. It makes you just like them. No, it makes me someone who stopped them. That is not the same thing. Sophie, I am falling in love with you, and I am terrified that I am going to lose you to this, that you are going to cross a line you cannot come back from. Please, walk away. We can build a life, a real one, not one built on revenge. Sophie looked at him, at this good man who had lost his wife and rebuilt himself and was trying to save her from herself. She kissed him, let herself feel it, the connection, the possibility of something beyond the mission. Then she pulled back. I cannot walk away, not when I am this close, but after, when it is done. Maybe then. There is no after. Do you understand that? You think you can do this and go back to normal? You cannot. This changes you permanently. I know, but I am choosing it anyway. Daniel stood, looked down at her with an expression that broke her heart. Then I will be there. When it falls apart, when you need someone to pull you out of the wreckage, I will be there. Because I love you even if you are making the worst mistake of your life. He walked away into the darkness. Sophie sat alone and thought about choices, about the cost of justice, about the difference between right and necessary. Her phone buzzed. Victoria. We have the evidence. Come to the penthouse. We plan the final move. Sophie stood, walked through the empty park, headed back to the tower where she had been reborn as someone else. 2 more weeks. Then the confrontation. Then Marcus Caldwell would face everything he had built. And Sophie would finally finish what her father started. She thought about Eleanor's words. Justice heals. Revenge just punishes. She thought about Marcus's confession, the wounded child inside the monster. She thought about Claire's smile, about Daniel's love, about all the people who would be hurt when the bomb she was building finally detonated. And she walked forward anyway, because some things mattered more than comfort, more than love, more than her own soul. Her father had died to stop this evil. She would finish it, whatever it cost. The game was almost over. And Sophie Bennett, the invisible woman who had learned to be seen, was about to make the loudest man in the room fall silent forever. The conference room at Caldwell Tower was designed for intimidation. 20-foot black marble table, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor, where Marcus's ships came and went with their hidden cargo. Leather chairs that cost more than most people made in a month. The architecture of power. Sophie stood at the windows and watched the water. 2 weeks had passed since she scanned the black book. 2 weeks of Dimitri decoding the entries, of James preparing the legal framework, of Victoria coordinating with federal prosecutors who had been trying to build a case against the Russo syndicate for a decade. 2 weeks of Sophie lying to everyone, to Marcus, to Claire, to herself. Today it ended. The meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. Marcus thought it was a final strategy session before the Mer Elegance board vote. He had invited his legal team, his CFO. He thought he was about to win. Victoria Rousseau had accepted the meeting invitation. She thought she was coming to hear Marcus's final pitch. Only Sophie and her team knew what was really about to happen. The elevator opened. Marcus entered first. Navy suit, confident stride. He looked rested, happy. He thought today would be his triumph. Behind him came his lawyers. Then the CFO, a nervous man named Miller who shuffled papers and avoided eye contact. "Elena," Marcus said, smiling. "Ready to close this deal?" Sophie turned from the window. She wore white, a deliberate choice, purity against his darkness. The symbolism felt heavy. "I am ready," she said. The elevator opened again. Victoria Rousseau, elegant as always in a Chanel suit. She sat across from Marcus with the calm of someone who held all the cards. "Marcus," she said, "no warmth. Let us hear what you have to say." Marcus launched into his presentation. Numbers, projections, synergies. The language of business used to hide the reality of what he was buying. Access, routes, infrastructure for moving cargo that would never appear on manifests. Sophie watched him perform, saw the boy from Boston who had been beaten by his father, who had built an empire to prove he was worth something, who had succeeded at business and failed at being human. She felt no satisfaction, only a deep, tired sadness. When Marcus finished, Victoria looked at Sophie. "What does your consultant think?" Sophie stood, walked to the screens at the front of the room, pulled out a remote control. "I think we need to discuss what is really being acquired." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean the actual business, not the one in your pitch deck, the real one." Sophie pressed a button. The screens behind Marcus flickered to life, but instead of corporate presentations, they showed something else. Pages from a black leather notebook, handwritten ledger entries, dates, amounts, coded transactions. Marcus's face went white. He spun in his chair to look at the screens. "What is this? Turn it off." Sophie's voice was calm, steady. "It is the truth, Marcus. It is what happens when you let someone into your world, when you trust them with your secrets, when you show them where the bodies are buried." She pressed another button. The decoded translations appeared beside the original entries. Shipping manifests cross-referenced with payments, names of Russo operatives, routes that match trafficking patterns. "This is not a presentation for Mer Elegance," Sophie said. "This is evidence for the FBI, for Interpol, for everyone who has been trying to stop you and the Russo syndicate for the past decade." Marcus stood. His chair scraped violently across marble. "How did you get this? You were in my safe." "Yes, you showed it to me. Remember? That night you were drinking scotch and telling me about your father, how he beat you, how you built all this to prove you were worth something." She paused. "Let the words land. You trusted me, and I used that trust to destroy you." The lawyers were backing away. Miller was already heading for the door. Victoria sat perfectly still, watching with satisfaction. Marcus turned to her. "You planned this, you and her, you set me up." Victoria smiled. It was not kind. "I have been hunting you for 9 years, Marcus, since you helped the Russo syndicate kill my sister. Did you think I would let you expand into Europe? Let you use Mer Elegance to traffic more women?" She gestured to the screen. "Meet Elena Ashford," except that is not her real name. Sophie stepped forward. Let the European accent drop. Let her natural voice emerge. "My name is Sophie Bennett." Marcus stared at her. No recognition. "My father was David Bennett, cryptographer, the man who froze the Russo accounts in 2021, the man you helped them murder. He used 3 numbers as his signature code, 381427, the combination to your safe. You never knew you were using a dead man's numbers every day." The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. His father had beaten him on March 8, 2014. 3.8.14.27. It was the date he chose to never forget. But David Bennett had known, had embedded it in the Russo systems, had left a signature that Marcus used without understanding. "You planned this for years," Marcus whispered. "My father planned it," Sophie corrected. "I just finished it." Realization dawned. Horror, understanding. Bennett, the code guy, but you are. I am his daughter. And I have spent the last 4 months infiltrating your organization, learning your business, earning your trust. Also, I could finish what he started. Marcus looked around the room, at the screens, at Victoria, at the door where his people had fled, understanding he was trapped. You were the waitress. Sophie nodded. L'Étoile d'Argent. 3 months ago. You told your date I could not read the menu. You laughed at me, called me invisible. Do you remember? Marcus's mouth opened, closed, the pieces clicking together. The transformation, the accent, the confidence, all of it designed to make him forget the invisible woman he had humiliated. But I trusted you, he said. His voice broke. I showed you things I have never shown anyone. I told you about my father, about Claire, about my failures. Sophie felt something crack inside her chest. I know, and I am sorry for that. But you trafficked women, Marcus. You moved cargo containers with human beings inside. You helped the people who killed my father, who killed Victoria's sister, who are destroying lives every day. She stepped closer. Your trust does not erase your crimes. The elevator doors opened. FBI agents flooded in, Daniel among them. He looked at Sophie with an expression she could not read. Sadness, resignation, love despite everything. Marcus Caldwell, hands where we can see them. Marcus did not move. He stared at Sophie. I could have been different. If I had made other choices. If I had chosen Claire over the Empire. I told you that. And you used it against me. Yes, Sophie said, her voice steady despite the tears she felt building. Because some things are more important than your redemption. The women in those containers matter more than your pain. My father matters more than your regrets. The agents grabbed Marcus, spun him against the window. The handcuffs clicked into place. As they led him toward the elevator, Marcus looked back at Sophie one last time. You won. But at what cost? Look at yourself. You became exactly what you were fighting. Someone who lies, who manipulates, who destroys people to achieve their goals. Sophie held his gaze. The difference is I did it to save people. You did it for money. That is the line between us. Marcus shook his head. Keep telling yourself that. Maybe someday you will believe it. The elevator doors closed. The room fell silent. Victoria stood, walked to Sophie, put a hand on her shoulder. It is done. Your father is avenged. The Rousseau network is broken. You did what you came to do. Sophie stared at the empty room. Then why do I feel like I lost something? Because you did. You lost the illusion that justice is clean, that you can fight monsters without becoming monstrous. But you also saved lives. You stopped evil. That has to count for something. Does it? Victoria squeezed her shoulder. It has to. Otherwise, none of us can sleep at night. Sophie turned away from the screens, from the evidence, from the mission that had consumed her for 4 months. I need to see my mother. Eleanor was in her wheelchair in the hospital garden. The new clinic had outdoor spaces, trees, flowers, light. She looked better. The medication was working. The stress was gone. She almost looked healthy. Sophie sat on a bench beside her. They watched birds for a long moment. It is done, Sophie said finally. Marcus Caldwell was arrested this morning. The Rousseau syndicate is being dismantled. 23 arrests across 3 continents. They found the evidence because of what I gave them. Eleanor took her daughter's hand. Then David can rest, and so can you. Can I? Sophie's voice cracked. Mom, I did terrible things. I lied to people, manipulated them, made Marcus trust me just so I could destroy him. Daniel says I became what I was fighting. What if he is right? Eleanor was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentle. Did you enjoy it? Hurting Marcus, watching him fall. No, I felt sick, like I was betraying something fundamental in myself. Then you did not become a monster. Monsters enjoy the pain they cause. You did what was necessary, and it cost you something. That is the definition of sacrifice. She squeezed Sophie's hand tighter. Your father felt the same way. Every time he took dirty money, every time he helped criminals hide their crimes, it aided him. But he did it to protect us, to build a life. And when he finally found a line he could not cross, he stood. Just like you did. Sophie leaned against her mother's shoulder. I'm so tired. Then rest. The war is over. Now comes the hard part. What is that? Learning to live with what you have done. Finding a way forward that honors what you fought for without consuming you. Building something instead of destroying. How do I do that? Eleanor smiled. You start by helping one person, then another, until the good you do outweighs the cost of how you did it. The trial took 6 weeks. Sophie testified, explained the infiltration, the coded ledger, the Russo connections. The defense attorneys tried to discredit her, called her a liar, a manipulator, someone motivated by revenge rather than justice. Sophie sat in the witness box and told the truth. Yes, she had lied. Yes, she had manipulated. Yes, she wanted revenge for her father. But that did not change the facts. The ledger was real. The shipments were real. The Russo syndicate was real. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Marcus Caldwell stood for sentencing without expression. The judge gave him 40 years. No parole. Before they took him away, Marcus was allowed to make a statement. He looked at the courtroom, at Sophie in the gallery, at Claire, who sat on the opposite side, as far from Sophie as she could get. I do not ask for mercy, Marcus said. I knew what I was doing. I made choices, terrible choices. But I want to say one thing to my daughter. He turned to Claire. His voice broke. Claire, you are better than I ever was. Do not let what I did define you. You are not responsible for my sins. Build the life you deserve. Be the person I never could be. Claire was crying, but she did not speak, did not acknowledge him, just sat there with tears streaming down her face. They led Marcus away. Sophie watched him go, felt no triumph, just a hollow ache where the mission had lived for 4 months. Outside the courthouse, Claire was waiting. She walked up to Sophie with eyes red from crying. You destroyed him. Sophie did not deny it. I did. He trusted you. I trusted you. We let you in and you used us. Yes. Claire's hands were shaking. He deserved it. I know that. I read the evidence. I saw what he did. Those women, the trafficking, the lies. He was a monster. She wiped her eyes. But he was also my father, the man who taught me to ride a bike, who paid for my art school even though he thought it was frivolous, who called me every birthday even when we were not speaking. And you took him from me. Sophie felt tears on her own face now. I am sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. But I could not let him continue. Could not let the Russo syndicate expand. There were more important things than protecting you from the truth. Claire nodded. She understood. But understanding did not make it hurt less. I need you to know something, Claire said. I do not forgive you. I cannot. Not yet. Maybe not ever. You made a choice, and I understand why. But that choice destroyed my family, so I need you to stay away from me, forever. Sophie swallowed hard. I understand. Claire turned to leave, then stopped. But I also need to say thank you, because if you had not stopped him, I would have spent the rest of my life not knowing, being complicit through ignorance. You gave me the truth, even though it destroyed everything. She walked away without looking back. Sophie stood on the courthouse steps and felt the weight of what she had done. Justice achieved, lives saved, evil stopped, and all it cost was Claire's trust, Marcus's freedom, Sophie's own sense of innocence. Daniel found her there an hour later. She was sitting on the steps, staring at nothing. He sat beside her, did not speak, just sat. Finally, Sophie broke the silence. You were right, about all of it. I crossed lines I cannot come back from. I hurt people who did not deserve it. I became someone I do not recognize. Daniel took her hand. But you also stopped a trafficking network, saved lives, gave families answers. That counts for something, does it? Or did I just satisfy my own need for revenge and tell myself it was justice? Maybe both. Maybe that is the reality of doing hard things. You cannot save everyone. You cannot be pure. You just do what you can and live with the consequences. How do you live with it? Daniel was quiet for a moment. You find something to build, something good, something that balances the scales. Sophie looked at him. Do you still love me after everything you saw? Daniel smiled. It was sad but genuine. I love you more. Because I saw you make impossible choices and still question yourself, still care about the cost. Monsters do not do that, people do. He stood, offered his hand. Come on, let me take you home. Sophie let him pull her up. I do not have a home anymore. Victoria's penthouse was temporary. My apartment in Queens is gone. I have nowhere to go. Daniel kept holding her hand. Then come to my place, rest, figure out what comes next. You do not have to do it alone. Sophie looked at this man who had warned her, who had loved her despite disagreeing with her choices, who was offering her a soft place to land after the war. She took his hand and let him lead her away from the courthouse, away from the mission, toward something that might eventually feel like healing. 6 months passed. Sophie did not see Victoria, did not go back to the penthouse, did not follow the aftermath of the Russo prosecutions. She moved in with Daniel, learned to sleep without nightmares, learned to look at herself in the mirror without seeing Elena Ashford staring back. She visited her mother every day. Eleanor was stable. The disease had not progressed. The stress reduction and new medication were giving her more time, more life. And slowly, Sophie started to build something. She called Victoria once, asked about the team. Dmitri had returned to Moscow, helping anti-trafficking groups with technical infrastructure. Claudette was coaching refugees in language skills. James had taken a position with an international court focusing on human rights cases. Simone was running workshops for domestic violence survivors, teaching them confidence through appearance. They had all moved forward, all found ways to channel what they had learned. And Sophie would too. She used her father's Bitcoin wallet, $2.4 million in recovered Russo funds, created a foundation, the Eleanor and Margot Foundation, named for her mother and Victoria's sister, dedicated to helping trafficking survivors rebuild their lives. She started small, called Rosa Martinez, the woman from the diner who had left $2 on an $8 check, who had whispered, "We women gotta look out for each other." Rosa had escaped trafficking herself 12 years ago, worked 3 jobs, raised 2 kids alone. She understood survival. She understood what it meant to be invisible and fight your way back to being seen. "I need someone to run a foundation," Sophie said. "Someone who knows what these women are going through. Someone with a heart big enough to help them heal." Rosa was quiet for a long moment. "I clean tables and serve coffee. I do not know how to run a foundation. I will teach you everything. Accounting, grant writing, legal frameworks. But what I cannot teach is what you already have. Compassion, understanding, the ability to look at someone at their worst and see their potential." Rosa's voice cracked. "When do I start?" "Tomorrow, if you are ready." "I have been ready for 12 years. They built it together, slow, careful, learning as they went. Rosa brought 3 other survivors onto the team, women who had escaped, who had rebuilt, who wanted to help, and they started helping. One woman at a time, legal aid, therapy, job training, housing assistance. The foundation grew. By month 3, they had helped 18 women. By month 6, 53. Small numbers. But each one was a life reclaimed, a future rebuilt. And Sophie opened a restaurant, not in Manhattan, in Queens, near where she and her mother used to live. A small place, intimate, warm, the kind of restaurant where everyone was welcome. She called it Chez David, in memory of her father, the man who had fought monsters and lost, the man who had prepared her without her knowing, the man whose last words were "Finish what I started." The menu was in 3 languages, English, French, Spanish, no dress code, no VIP tables, just good food and dignity for everyone who walked through the door. Sophie worked the front, not as owner, as host. She greeted people, took coats, made recommendations, became visible by choice rather than necessity. Eleanor came once a week, sat at the corner table in her wheelchair, and watched her daughter build something good from the ashes of the mission. Daniel came every night when he finished work, sat at the bar and read while Sophie worked. A quiet presence, a reminder that she was not alone. And one Tuesday evening, 3 months after the opening, a young woman walked in. Early 20s, cheap clothes, nervous expression. She looked at the menu and bit her lip. "I have never eaten French food," she said to Sophie. "I cannot afford much, but I heard this place was different." Sophie smiled. It was genuine now, no mask, no performance, just human warmth. "First meal is free for anyone starting a new chapter. What chapter are you starting?" The woman's eyes filled with tears. "I just left my boyfriend. He was hurting me. I have nothing, no money, no plan. But I left." Sophie came around the counter, took the woman's hands. "Then you have everything. You have yourself, and you have us." She led her to a table, brought her soup, chestnut velouté, the same dish she had described to Marcus Caldwell a year ago in a different life. The woman ate slowly, savoring each bite. When she finished, Sophie sat across from her. "There is a foundation. We help women who are rebuilding, housing, job training, legal support. If you want help, we can help. Why? The woman asked. You do not know me. Sophie thought about her father, about Margot, about all the women in containers, about the cost of doing nothing. Because someone helped me once, when I had nothing, when I was invisible, and I am paying it forward. The woman cried. Sophie held her hand, gave her the foundation's information, watched her leave with something that looked like hope. When the restaurant closed that night, Sophie stood in the empty dining room and felt something she had not felt in a year. Peace. Not happiness, not yet, but peace. Daniel walked over, put his arms around her from behind. Good day. We help someone, so yes. You are building something beautiful. Sophie leaned back against him. I am trying to make the cost worth it, trying to honor what Dad did, what I did. You are succeeding. They stood there in the quiet. Two people who had lost things, who had made hard choices, who were learning to live with consequences and build anyway. Sophie's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She opened it. It was from Claire. I saw the foundation. What you are doing, it is good work. Thank you for using your father's money for something that helps people. Maybe someday I can forgive what you did, but for now, I want you to know I see you trying to make it right. Also, I got a publishing contract, a children's book series about invisible children becoming heroes. The first one is dedicated to all the invisible people who found their voices. I thought you should know. Sophie showed the text to Daniel. She is healing in her own way. That is something. Time helps. Does it? Will time help me forget what I did? The lies? The manipulation? No. But time will help you accept that you did what you thought was necessary, and that you are spending the rest of your life trying to balance the scales. Sophie turned in his arms, kissed him. Thank you for staying, for loving me when I did not deserve it. You always deserved it, you just did not believe it. The restaurant became part of the neighborhood. People came because the food was good and the prices were fair, and the woman at the front made them feel seen. Some knew her story, most did not. It did not matter. Eleanor's health stabilized. She lived another 5 years, long enough to see the foundation help 300 women, long enough to see Sophie marry Daniel, long enough to hold her granddaughter and whisper Sophie's father's name like a prayer of gratitude. When Eleanor died, it was peacefully, in her sleep, with Sophie holding her hand. At the funeral, Victoria Rousseau came. They had not spoken in 3 years. She sat in the back, did not approach, just left a note with the funeral director. Your mother was proud of you. So am I. You did what needed to be done, and you did it with more grace than I would have managed. Thank you for finishing it. Margot can rest now. So can David. Sophie read the note and cried. For her parents, for Margot, for the cost of justice, for the price everyone paid. But she also felt something else. Gratitude, that she had been given the chance to fight, to finish what her father started, to make a difference even if it cost her pieces of herself. Marcus Caldwell served 7 years of his sentence before dying of a heart attack in prison. When Sophie heard the news, she felt nothing. No satisfaction, no regret, just acknowledgement that a chapter had closed. Claire sent flowers to the funeral, a simple arrangement. The card read, "From the daughter he failed, but who is trying to forgive, and thank you for being brave enough to stop him." Sophie kept the card, a reminder that some wounds heal slowly, that forgiveness is a process, that sometimes the best you can do is try. The years passed, the restaurant thrived, the foundation grew. Rosa became a fierce advocate, testifying before Congress about trafficking prevention. The team expanded. 12 full-time staff, hundreds of volunteers, thousands of women helped. Sophie and Daniel had 2 children, raised them with the same word games David had taught Sophie, codes hidden in bedtime stories, patterns in poetry, teaching them to see what others missed, but hoping they would never have to use it the way she had. On the 10th anniversary of Marcus Caldwell's arrest, Sophie stood in the restaurant after closing, the same spot she had stood a decade ago when the young woman asked for help. Daniel found her there. Thinking about the anniversary? Sophie nodded. 10 years. 3,000 women helped by the foundation. Hundreds of families given answers. The Russo syndicate still broken. All because I walked into a restaurant one night and refused to stay invisible. Was it worth it? Sophie thought about the question. Really thought about it. I destroyed Marcus Caldwell. Hurt Claire. Lost pieces of myself I will never get back. I crossed lines and made choices I still question." She paused. "But I also stopped evil, saved lives, finished what my father started, built something good from something dark. So yes, it was worth it, even though it cost everything." Daniel kissed her forehead. "Your father would be proud." "I hope so. I hope wherever he is, he knows I finished it, that I used his signature. 381427, the numbers he embedded everywhere, the date he chose to make Marcus remember his own trauma every time he opened that safe. Dad was still fighting even after death." They turned off the lights, locked the door, walked out into the Queen's night where Sophie had once lived invisible and poor and desperate. Now she walked visible, scarred but whole, damaged but functional, a woman who had fought monsters and survived, not unchanged, never that, but alive and building, and trying every day to make the cost worth the price. Above the door, the sign glowed, Chez David, where everyone has a seat at the table. Sophie looked up at her father's name in light and spoke to him one last time. "I finished it, Dad, just like you asked. It was not clean. It was not easy. But I finished it. And I am spending the rest of my life making sure the cost meant something." She thought she felt something. A warmth, an approval, maybe just the wind, maybe something more. It did not matter. What mattered was that she had fought, had stood when she could have run, had chosen justice even when it hurt, had finished what David Bennett started. And in the end, that was enough. Sophie Bennett, the invisible waitress who learned to be seen, who became a weapon and then a builder, who destroyed an empire and created a sanctuary, walked home with her husband through the city she had saved in ways most people would never know. And somewhere in the night, in containers that would never carry human cargo again, in lives that had been saved by evidence she provided, in a trafficking network that had been broken because she refused to stay silent, her legacy lived, not perfect, not pure, but real, and necessary, and worth the price she paid. The menu nobody could read had been decoded, the invisible woman had been seen, the empire had fallen, and from the ashes, something good had grown. Justice, imperfect and costly, but justice nonetheless. And that would have to be enough.